di Pilipinas. Dahil sa pandemya ang ating kinakaharap, hindi mapigilan na tayo ay mapalayo sa ating mga mahal sa buhay. Ngunit hindi dapat maging hadlang ang distansya upang tayo ay mag-hashtag care for others. Kumusta mo na ba sina lolo at lola this week? How about sina mama at papa? Mga kapatid, kaklase? Kung hindi pa, ang isang simpleng kumusta sa pamamagitan ng video or voice calls o text messages ay tiyak na makatutulong sa kanilang mental well-being. Care for others, ang isang malakas na support system, ay nakakatulong rin sa pagpapabuti ng ating mental health. Kung ikaw o sino man sa iyong kakilala ang nangangailangan na makipag-usap sa isang mental health professional, tumawag lamang sa mga numerong ito mula sa National Center for Mental Health. Ito ay libre lamang at kahit sino ay pwedeng tumawag. Ngayong panahon ng pandemya, hindi biro ang pinagdadaanan mo, kaya naman make sure to care for yourself and care for others para sa isang healthy Pilipinas.
Let's see, 27.
Alvin, ano yung
Mental health
sa amin ni Mads
ng
kanina?
ating pangkabuuang kalusugan.
Research?
Walang health kung walang mental health. Ayon sa World Health Organization, mental health is a state of well-being in which an individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. Ang mental health ay mahalaga sa ating pangkabuuan at individual na abilidad magtrabaho, mag-isip, makaramdam at mabuhay. Kaya naman ngayong panahon ng pandemya, huwag kalimutang pangalagaan ang ating mental health tulad ng pag-aalaga natin sa ating physical health. Ang self-care ay isa sa pinakamabisang paraan upang pangalagaan ang ating mental health. Ang simpleng pag-exercise o pagtutok sa ating mga hobbies ay isang paraan ng self-care. Care for yourself. Bigyang oras ang sarili at mga bagay na nagbibigay sa iyo ng saya. Nagkakaroon ka na rin ba ng Zoom fatigue dahil sa meetings o di kaya ay sa online class? Huwag kalimutang magpahinga. Importanteng maglaan ng break at ipahinga ang utak. Maglaro muna ng paboritong games. Malaking tulong ang breathing exercises sa pagpapakalma at para maibsan ang ating pakiramdam. Matuto ring mag-set ng boundaries para sa iyong work-life balance. Matutong irespeto ang work boundaries ng iyong mga katrabaho. Dahil sa pandemya ang ating kinakaharap, hindi mapigilan na tayo ay mapalayo sa ating mga mahal sa buhay. Ngunit hindi dapat maging hadlang ang distansya upang tayo ay mag-hashtag care for others. Kumusta mo na ba sina lolo at lola this week? How about sina mama at papa? Mga kapatid, kaklase? Kung hindi pa, ang isang simpleng kumusta sa pamamagitan ng video or voice calls o text messages ay tiyak na makatutulong sa kanilang mental well-being. Care for others, ang isang malakas na support system, ay nakakatulong rin sa pagpapabuti ng ating mental health. Kung ikaw o sino man sa iyong kakilala ang nangangailangan na makipag-usap sa isang mental health professional, tumawag lamang sa mga numerong ito mula sa National Center for Mental Health. Ito ay libre lamang at kahit sino ay pwedeng tumawag. Ngayong panahon ng pandemya, hindi biro ang pinagdadaanan mo, kaya naman make sure to care for yourself and care for others para sa isang healthy Pilipinas.
sit with you? My name is Daisy. Ano nga ulit pangalan mo? Parati kang mag-isa. Tapos, minsan nakikita ka tang nakatitig ka lang sa kawalan. Siguro you're finding it weird that I'm trying so hard to be friends with you.
Bakit ka ba kasi nandito?
Kailangan ko ng tulong mo.
Daisy!
Hi, can I sit with you? My name is Daisy. Ano nga ulit pangalan mo? Parati kang mag-isa. Tapos, minsan nakikita ka tang nakatitig ka lang sa kawalan. Siguro you're finding it weird that I'm trying so hard to be friends with you.
Bakit ka ba kasi nandito?
Kailangan ko ng tulong mo.
Daisy!
Ang self-care ay isa sa pinakamabisang paraan upang pangalagaan ng ating mental health. Ang simpleng pag-exercise o pagtutok sa ating mga hobbies ay isang paraan ng self-care. Care for yourself, bigyang oras ang sarili at mga bagay na nagbibigay sa iyo ng saya. Nagkakaroon ka na rin ba ng Zoom fatigue dahil sa meetings o di kaya ay sa online class? Huwag kalimutang magpahinga. Importanteng maglaan ng break at ipahinga ang utak. Maglaro muna ng paboritong games. Malaking tulong ang breathing exercises sa pagpapakalma at para maibsan ang ating pakiramdam. Matuto ring mag-set ng boundaries para sa iyong work-life balance. Matutong respeto ang work boundaries ng iyong mga katrabaho. Ngayong panahon ng pandemya, hindi biro ang pinagdadaanan mo, kaya naman make sure to care for yourself and care for others para sa isang healthy Pilipinas. Dahil sa pandemya ang ating kinakaharap, hindi mapigilan na tayo ay mapalayo sa ating mga mahal sa buhay. Ngunit hindi dapat maging hadlang ang distansya upang tayo ay mag-hashtag care for others. Nakumusta mo na ba sina lolo at lola this week? How about sina mama at papa? Mga kapatid, kaklase? Kung hindi pa, ang isang simpleng kumusta sa pamamagitan ng video or voice calls o text messages ay tiyak na makatutulong sa kanilang
morning, everyone. Please stand by. We shall start the program in 5 minutes. Thank you. Good morning and welcome to the first Philippine Mental Health Research Summit webinar series number 2 entitled Well-Being and Cultural Relevance. Now let's place ourselves in the presence of the Almighty as we recite our opening prayer. This will be followed by the Philippine National Anthem. Hello and welcome once again to our Zoom participants. I am Amadeus Fernando Pahente, Senior Health Program Officer from the Mental Health Division of the Disease Prevention and Control Bureau of the Department of Health, and I am your host for today. We welcome you again to the 2021 Philippine Mental Health Research Summit, our Series 2, Well-Being and Cultural Relevance. This webinar is also streaming live on the official Facebook page of the UP Telehealth. Thus, we would like to remind everyone of a few house rules. To all our attendees, please put your questions in the Q&A chat box so we can line them up in an organized manner for the Q&A session. For our panelists, we request that you have your video and audio feeds turned off until you are engaged. Your adherence to these house rules will ensure a minimum of disruptions and the fluid progress of our discussions. For your attendance this morning, I would also like to request our participants to accomplish an attendance form for us to track your attendance for today. The link to the said attendance will be shared in the Zoom chat box and also flashed on the screen. Again, for the attendance, please accomplish them via the link on the chat box. Now we will have Dr. Violeta Bautista, Chair of the Webinar Series 2, to formally open today's program. Dr. Bautista is a Professor Emeritus from the Department of Psychology, College of Social Sciences and Philosophy from the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Dr. Bautista, you now have the virtual floor.
Gandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Good morning to everyone. So I'd like to welcome you to the second summit in a series of 5 on mental health research. Our summit series seeks to develop a culture of research on Philippine mental health. More specifically, we seek to encourage interdisciplinary exchange of studies on mental health and well-being, promote innovations on mental health research, such as approach mental health and well-being from the lenses of indigenization and contextualization. 3, to create a positive environment for mental health research by way of instituting mechanisms to foster communication, collaboration, dissemination, and utilization. And lastly, we hope our summit series will develop a roadmap to advance mental health research in the country. The first summit was held last month with the title Perspectives on Mental Health and Mental Health research. In that summit, we had the following presentations. One was entitled The Conceptual Framework for Mental Health in the Philippines. Another one is on National Mental Health Research Agenda, usually referred to as NIMRA. And the last one is about the Philippine National Health Research System. So we had quite a big audience last summit. About 1,480 joined us, and many of our participants came from the National Capital Region and also from Region 6 and Region 7. Okay. Many of the participants indicated that their fields of interest were on psychology, nursing, and psychiatry. And when asked to indicate what were their research areas of engagement, many ticked off the category on mental health in schools, well-being and wellness of everyday living, as well as accessibility of mental health services. Now, apparently, not so many of our participants were into the habit of publishing their research work, as could be seen on the slide. Okay. And it was a good time also for interaction. 1 hour was devoted to Q&A, and people were just raising their hands and keying into the chat box, asking questions, sharing their experiences. So it wasn't a surprise that in the post-webinar questionnaire, the majority of the participants reported that the webinar enhanced their interest and motivated them to do mental health research. Okay, great. So the development of our culture of research is on the way. Now we're into the second in the series of summits. And for this particular summit, we'll be dealing with well-being and cultural relevance. We will take a closer look at well-being and resilience and explore ways by which we can better situate our research interest on these areas. We will also focus on the importance of cultural relevance in mental health research. While we would like to have our theories and processes in mental health work to be evidence-informed and evidence-based, we also want to ensure that the evidence we have are rooted in our psyche and reality. So more specifically, this summit aims to learn about the different approaches to understanding well-being as a construct that relates to mental health, to clarify pathways to elucidating culturally sensitive conceptualization and measurement of the construct. 3, address key interests on well-being research, such as resilience and neuroscience. And 4, encourage individual researchers and groups to engage in well-being studies that promotes innovation along the lines of interdisciplinary engagement, theory, and program development. So we'll have the following flow of activities. We're already going through the welcome and introductory remarks, and then we'll soon be on with the presentations, and we have 4 lined up for you. The first one is entitled Well-Being and Being Filipino. The second, Cultural Roots of Well-Being and Resilience. The third, Neuroscience of Well-Being and Resilience. And the last one has the title Indigenization and Measurement of Well-Being. Then we'll have again, hopefully, 1 hour of Q&A where you could ask your questions and also give your comments and share your experiences. and we'll end with integration and closing remarks. Okay, so stay with us and let us share and learn together towards articulating culturally relevant ways of doing mental health research in our country, this time with special focus on well-being and resilience. Stay with us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bautista, for that warm welcome and the recap of the Series 1, and to share with us a glimpse of what to look forward for today's webinar series. Before we start with our activity, may we request all of the speakers to please turn on their cameras for a bit of a photo op.
Anong kanto dito, no? Sa
Good
i-open ko yung
morning.
apps video.
Opo.
Cockpit ops lang.
Yeah, we'll just wait for our tech to take the picture.
I don't have a camera. The host disabled it.
Same with me po.
Mulyo
Please
kasi
enable the video camera of Dr. De Castro to our tech person.
sige ma'am,
My
I think
camera is also disabled po.
sige ma'am.
Ay,
Nina.
si Dr. Karandang rin daw.
Yes, ma'am. I think the tech is already working on it. Thank you.
Ayan na po. Thank you.
Ako wala pa rin.
Alisin na nga natin usapan.
Hindi pa rin lumalabas.
Ako wala pa rin.
Oo nga eh.
Alisin, hindi ba pwede malis?
Hindi po mo, nakadikit na po.
Ang nakalagay sa box ko si Marlon.
Pero lagyan natin siya.
Hello, Dr. Karandang. Good to see you.
Gandang umaga po.
Na umaga po. Hi, Lenore.
Okay, may we request all of our speakers to please have your faces, plaster your smiles so our tech can already capture.
Still, I don't have a video.
Lumalabas na, malapit na. There,
Ayan,
there
Ma'am,
you
yes,
we
are.
ayan,
already
okay.
see you. Ma'am
Ayan,
Beth.
okay.
Okay, you can see me. Okay, I can't see myself. Anyway, okay lang.
We can see you. Ayan. Okay. Smile. Ayan. Thank you so much to all of our speakers for for maintaining the smiles. We will resume with our program. Um, thank you. Now, before anything else, we would like to remind everyone of our activities for this morning. At this point, we would like everyone also to answer this short poll with two very important questions. Before the poll begins, please click on the Mentimeter link posted in the chat box and tick the regions where you are currently located. So as you can see, we have quite a number of participants from NCR. The next bulk of the participants is from regions 4A and region 3. So we have the majority of our participants when we asked them to in which regions they are located. Majority came from NCR. I mean, this is not a surprise, I suppose. And the next largest number is from the region 4A, followed by region 3, and then followed by region 6. We're also very lucky to have participants in all of the regions, and we also have one participant rather from overseas. So thank you so much for your participations in today's webinar, and we proceed with another question for us to answer. Please answer the one that's posted on your screens. So we are asking our participants if kamusta na po sila ngayong umaga. And the second question is, sa inyong pananaw, ano ang pinakamahalaga para sa inyong kagalingan or your well-being? We'll wait for all of our participants to answer the poll. We have 64% of the participants, or rather 65% have already voted. Now we shall take a look at the results of our poll. As we can see, majority have answered that they are doing well or mabuti naman po sila. The next popular answer is mabuti po. And 16% said they're okay lang. 1% said that they hindi mabuti or hindi mabuti. For the next question wherein we are asking our participants kung ano yung pinakamahalaga para sa kanyang kagalingan, majority answered that it's God, followed by good health, and followed by their families. We also have about 5% for safety, 4% for money, for livelihood, for friends, and for the country. So these are the options that were given. And for that, we are asking the ones that are in our Facebook Live to consider these questions. How are we today? Kamusta po tayo ngayong umaga? And what are the things that we consider to be important para sa ating kagalingan or our well-being? At this point, we shall now begin the technical part of our program with the presentation of Dr. Nina Castillo Carandang. Dr. Carandang is a health social scientist and professor of the Department of Clinical Epidemiology of the University of the Philippines College of Medicine. This morning, she will be presenting Well-Being and Being Filipino. Take it away, Dr. Castillo Carandang.
Magandang araw po sa ating lahat. Sana po ay nasa mabuti at mabuti kayong kalagayan ngayong araw na ito. The topic assigned to me is well-being and being Filipino. Here's my outline. Context matters. Science evolves. Day 492. What is kagalingan? Kagalingan as a well-being approach or lens. The Filipino search for well-being, the good things in life, happiness and health, and the story of Angel and Mark. Being Filipino, the socialities of well-being and health. Well-being and being Filipino. Context matters. What you see depends not only on what you look at, but also on where you look from. What we do see also depends mainly on what we look for. We need to watch out for bias. We are human, therefore we are biased. Science evolves. Science is infrequently all-encompassing. Scientific and intellectual humility is important. What if we are wrong? There's much we still need to discover and understand. There is so much more about the world which we do not know, and what we think we now know might change in the near future. Hence the important roles of scientists, teachers, health professionals, mental health workers and advocates, and communities. And let me quote from my late father, academician Leopoldo Sanchez Castillo, who was an animal nutritionist and dairy scientist. and he said in 1968, "The desperate need of millions of people in developing countries should be enough incentive for a research worker to do much effective experimentation designed to alleviate their condition." Let me now borrow from my mother, national scientist and rural sociologist Helia Tagumpay Castillo, and she wrote about science, equity, and ethics. "I've always believed that when the best science and scientists are devoted to the problems of those who have less in life, that is equity and ethics at its best. If science will serve a human purpose, what better human purpose is there?" We have been on a forever lockdown, and it's now day 492. And in fact, if you look at the cartoon of the FEU Institute of Nursing student publication, they have a cartoon says we have the world longest lockdown only in the Philippines. Today, I want to greet everybody and give you all well wishes. I also want to thank everyone for your participation and also for our frontline workers, whether in the health sector or in the other economic sectors. They keep our society running. I also want to give a prayer for all of those who are sick and those who have gone ahead of us. So pagbati, pasasalamat at dasal. Sa gitna ng kagutuman, sa gitna ng kawalan ng pagkakataon na makapag-alaga sa mga may sakit, makipagsalamuha sa mga kaibigan at sa mahal sa buhay, makapagpaalam sa mga yumao. Pagkalito, papalit-palit po ang ating classifications ng different forms of lockdown. Papalit-palit din po ang mga polisiya na ibinabahagi sa taong bayan. Kulang po ang pagtugon sa hamon ng COVID-19. Hindi lang po sa larangan ng kalusugan, pati na rin po sa ekonomiya. At ngayon po ay litong-lito rin ang mga politiko sa lahat ng mga gusto nila para sa sarili nila. Let me now switch on what is kagalingan. The rest of my talk really is from my PhD dissertation and book called Kagalingan, the Filipino Search for Well-Being, Happiness, and Health. Kagalingan is a Filipino Tagalog noun. It denotes a state of well-being, health and happiness, welfare, being proficient at something. A person presumably needs good health, physical, mental, social, to enable her to achieve a skill or level of proficiency at something and vice versa. It would be difficult for someone to achieve kagalingan if one does not have well-being, kindness, does not take the welfare of oneself and significant others into consideration, does not have some level of comfort or some level of wealth, does not have some level of success in life, does not have some relief, is not in good health, sound in mind, body, and spirit, or if one has not recovered from an ailment. Let me now proceed to kagalingan as a well-being approach or lens. It is a holistic lens, relational and subjective in nature. Kagalingan is about positives, what people can do, what they can be, what they can feel. And to quote also from my late nanay, it is about the small pleasures of daily well-being. So kagalingan has material, subjective, and relational dimensions. A Filipino sense of well-being means living in harmony with one's fellow men, with nature, and a higher being. So there are elements of relationality and sociality, plus having access, however limited, to the good things in life, material sufficiency, and food security. Let me share with you the story of Angel and Mark in their search for well-being, the good things in life, happiness, and health. They lack access to the good things in life and the small pleasures of daily well-being. Angel, her husband Mark, and their family lived in a barangay which had a lot of COVID-19 cases and deaths. Life was very difficult amidst the lockdown. No income due to travel restrictions. Food was hard to come by. Angel had COVID-19, but she also had other risk factors such as hypertension and suffered from a case of nervios. Mark also got sick with COVID-19. He also had the additional risk factor of diabetes, plus he was plagued by insomnia. It was not the physical symptoms of COVID-19, but the nervios, the poor sleep, lack of nutritious food, and not eating on time, and not eating at least 3 meals a day, which gave a lot of stress to Angel, Mark, and their family. They were physically distant with their neighbors and their loved ones, but they were socially connected. They had good social relations and strong social support. Therefore, they were content but not healthy amidst the extreme community quarantine in their barangay. Let me now talk about being Filipino, the socialities of well-being and health. What is sociality? It's the extent to which people are likely to relate, connect with others, and develop shared or collaborative associations. The health effects of sociality can be positive and negative. Some examples are positive side, social connectivity, social support, and integration. The negative health effects can be increased transmission of infectious agents, social isolation, greater social competition, which contributes to stress, vulnerability to sickness and infection, mental health problems, and other related issues. The socialities of well-being are such that social and material environments which a person and her social groups interact with modifies an individual's and or his group's potential predisposition to either or both infectious and non-communicable diseases, including mental health. The sociality of health experiences and the processes associated with well-being interlink with the manner people learn and experience how to live well and how to be well amidst the opportunities and challenges of social relationships and realities of daily living. There is a reciprocal link between health and well-being. Health, the physical, mental, and social aspects, and also well-being and even happiness are all interlinked with each other. What are the possibilities? A person might have physical and or mental ailments or social impairment and yet have good well-being. On the other hand, a person does not have any physical and or mental ailment or social impairment but might have poor well-being. The notions of health and well-being that we have are emerging. They're influenced and reshaped by our social circumstances, processes, and realities, just such as our gender, power, and disparities. The experiences of well-being and health and illness are both personal and social in nature. So the important issue to address is as follows. How are health and well-being described and expressed, redescribed and restated, and how are health and well-being experienced wherever you might be? Health and ill health and well-being can be viewed as sociocultural phenomena or experiences. They come from the living and working environments, our socioeconomic and gender positions, and ways of life, our behaviors of individuals, families, and communities. They are shaped with other people in ways that are culturally situated. They are described and categorized in agreement with prevailing sociocultural ideas. As sociocultural phenomena and experiences, health And ill health and well-being are lived through or experienced in a manner that has been shaped by existing sociocultural concepts. There are different ideas about health and well-being across cultures and across the life course. Well-being, as well as illness, can be socially constructed. But if you look at the literature, there is more the social construction of illness rather than the social construction of well-being. If you focus on the social construction of well-being, it is a state of existence, how well-being comes into being during social interaction within a specific cultural context. People's shared circumstances influence what are understood as social as well as health-related experiences and know-how. Well-being and health experiences, illness and the illness experience, medical knowledge, all of these take on cultural connotations and they're embedded and shaped by sociocultural systems. Let me now talk about well-being and being Filipino. To quote from the authors here, Natana Sabapati and Matthias Smith in 2019, they had an article which talked about the philosophical perspectives of being and becoming. They argue that there is a distinction between being and becoming. The state of being reflects how a person's nature or behavior is at present. Becoming is a transition towards an embodiment of the desired change, which will demonstrate a transformative movement. So, well-being and being Filipino is embodied in our current state of being, as reflected in our nature or behavior as Filipinos, transforming into becoming of the desired change. So good social relations, material sufficiency, and food security are essential to a Filipino's sense of well-being. Our social relations are rooted in material conditions of living, and these are integral to well-being and health. So well-being is not all about health, good or poor, as it is usually defined from a biomedical perspective. The Filipino aims for kagalingan and a good society, not just a good life or the good life. Kagalingan sa kalagitnaan ng pandemya is also juxtaposed with resilience or katatagan, may kakayahang umangkop sa mga hamon ng buhay. And all of this involves a constantly changing process through which Filipinos adapt and thrive and regain a sense of well-being or kagalingan in the face of various challenges and stressors, family and social relationships, health, workplace, finances, and so on. In June 2020, I was invited by the National Academy of Science and Technology to give a talk which I entitled This Thing Called Corona. After the talk, NAST produced a social media card from my lecture. And let me quote, policies for COVID-19 should be based on transdisciplinary and evidence-based science and good public health, sociocultural and behavioral realities. Working together and communicating with each other are integral to a holistic response to the challenges of the pandemic. The so-called new normal is not normal. We need to pivot our responses, the priorities, policies, interventions, actions, and behaviors so that we can transition to what hopefully will be a better everyday in a just and humane society. Maraming salamat po for the organizers, the Department of Health, the Philippine Council for Mental Health, particularly the Technical Committee on Research, Dr. Cabral Lim, Dr. Villaroman Bautista, Dr. Hines, my fellow speakers, the moderators, and the host. Shout out to Mr. Marlon Alcantara and the DOH technical team. Good day to everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Castillo Carandang, for enlightening us with your presentation on well-being and being Filipino. Next up, we have Dr. Elizabeth De Castro, Director of the Psychosocial Support and Children's Rights Resource Center, and a retired professor from the University of the Philippines. She has been doing research on children and children's rights issues since 1986. At present, she serves as an advisory board member of the Mental Health and Psychosocial Support Network, and she has received several national and international awards, the most notable of which are the Outstanding Women in the Nation's Service Award or Towns in the Philippines, and the Leo and Liesel Eitinger Human Rights Awards in Oslo, Norway, both in 1992. In this recorded presentation, she will present the cultural roots of well-being, and resilience.
Umaga po sa inyong lahat at maraming salamat sa imbitasyon na magsalita dito sa inyong Mental Health Research Summit Series number 2. Ang sasabihin ko po ngayong umaga ay tungkol sa cultural roots of resilience in the context of well-being. Recent events have popularized the concept of resilience as we struggle these past 2 years and go about our daily lives in an attempt to survive and move on with the impact that the pandemic has created on our mental health and well-being. The concept has been overused, overrated, and ill-defined to support an explanation of why and how people survive despite the challenges and difficulties in these trying times. Resilience discourse has grown because of people's strong desire to find ways of how to balance very stressful family and work-life situations and unstable economies and conflict-ridden communities, especially in this time of the pandemic. Let me start with definitions, which I'm sure has already been discussed in earlier presentations. But what is resilience? Resilience refers to a pattern of positive adaptation in the context of significant risks or adversity. Resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties and tough problems. It is an inference about a person's life that requires two judgments: that the person is doing okay and that there is now or has been significant risks or adversities to overcome. Terminologies. Studies using different terminologies when referring to the resilience approach are strength-based approach, empowerment-based approach, resilience-based model, and a family and community resilience approach are just some of the languages used to understand resilience. Studies reviewed do not necessarily use the term resilience approach, rather labels that are more or less indicative of a resilience approach. This includes such terms as resilience-based mentoring, person-centered therapy, and positive youth development. However, we must not forget that the single word resilience does not exist in many other countries like the Philippines, where we have English as the one-size-fits-all language, or the dominant language of discourse reflecting the context of a dominant culture. And language, we have to remember, is a mirror of culture, and culture is a mirror of our behavior. However, we can infer whether the concept of resilience is embedded in the in-depth knowledge and evidence of the impact of resilience on the lives of the Filipinos, especially their children, their families, and their communities. So the big question for this presentation is there an evidence of psychosocial cultural roots of resilience in the Philippines? The answer is yes. And how do we find this evidence? We have to discuss briefly a culture and indigenization movement, or the culture and indigenization movement. Culture is meaning and information system shared by a group of people and transmitted across generation. In a nutshell, it is a way of life. Indigenization is the act of making something more native, transformation of some service, an idea to suit a local culture, especially through the use of more indigenous peoples and practices in daily life. It incorporates indigenous ways of knowing and doing, incorporating worldviews, knowledge, and perspectives from indigenous cultures. What is the indigenization movement and what are the types? These are the cultural beginnings when we try to understand the cultural roots of resilience. We have two types and directions for indigenization. Indigenization from without. The outside culture is the source, and elements are imported and transformed into something indigenous to the population via translation, replication, and modification. In a nutshell, it is cut and paste. In other words, foreign tests are therefore translated, or researches are replicated and modified in order to fit the present culture under study. The second direction of indigenization is from within, cultural revalidation. Indigenous culture is the source, and the process involves semantic elaboration or recodification and systematic explication of implied theoretical frameworks to produce knowledge that reflects the indigenous experience and realities. We are looking at resilience and its cultural roots from the lens of indigenization from within. Let me now introduce to you the attempt of psychology, or the discipline of psychology, in understanding that ideas of indigenization from within. So let me introduce to you what we now know, or what I teach as Psikolohiyang Pilipino. Why is there Psikolohiyang Pilipino? And credits and honor to have been a student of Dr. Virgilio Enriquez, who is the founder of this discipline, this movement of Psikolohiyang Pilipino. First of all, because there were a lot of questions and replications and reservations about the applicability of Western models in Philippine and Asian context and culture. In other words, it does not apply. Misconceptions and assumptions about the human being. There were differences and various opinions between individualistic societies, let's say like the American culture, and collectivist societies like Philippine societies and other Asian cultures. There were also differences between contextualized and decontextualized societies. The Philippine society is being more contextualized, and the American society and the European society being more decontextualized. I will not have the time to explain all of these differences here, but let me just underscore the importance of that. And of course, the important point of indigenization from within is it has to be based on Philippine history, language, and culture. So let's start and find out what is this indigenization from within in the area of psychology with focus on resilience. What is Psikolohiyang Filipino? It is born out of the experience, thought, and orientation of the Filipinos based on the full use of culture and language. For centuries, Filipino behavior has been analyzed and interpreted in the light of Western theories and theologies. Enriquez takes into account the study of various elements of psychology like emotions and experience and knowledge. Translated, it's kalooban and kamalayan. Awareness of one's surroundings, ulirat. Information and understanding, isip. Habit and behavior, diwa. And kaluluwa, soul. The principal emphasis of Psikolohiyang Filipino is to foster national identity and consciousness, social involvement and psychology of language and culture, and its applications to daily life and daily living. I would like to bring us now to more specifics of the connection between cultural roots and resilience, and I would like to focus on the factors of resilience as mentioned in some literatures. One of the major factors in resilience or variables in resilience is personality. And so I will discuss Filipino personality, or what is called pagkataong Pilipino. Pagkataong Pilipino, if you break that down, it means pagka and tao, being human. Therefore, if you use the verb pagpapakatao, the art of being human, possessing characteristics of a human being, okay, sa buong katauhan. And these are some of the elements embedded in pagkataong Pilipino: self-efficacy, coherence, and empathy. Is this resonating with resilience? Of course, the answer is yes. How do we find that out? Of course, we have to say, sometimes we have to look at traits or characteristics. Although the definition of resilience is not a trait or characteristic, but rather a manifestation or indicator of certain aspects of pagpapakatao. So let's delve now into who is this Filipino personality and what are the human values. This is where we have to rethink not only the Filipino personality, but also look at the human values accommodated in this entire concept of resilience. Here is the concept ng pagkataong Pilipino as elucidated by Dr. Prospero Cobar, an anthropologist. The metaphor here for pagkataong Pilipino is banga or a vase or a container, okay? And basically, it has several parts and several layers and several circular dimensions, okay? At the core of banga is the concept of laob, and I will connect resilience to this entire concept of laob. At the outer circle of banga is the concept of labas. So there is mula sa labas patungo sa loob. In the outer circle, smaller outer circle, you have, once you are in the loob, the concept is hindi ka ibang tao. This is the relational aspect. Once you are in the labas, ang consideration sa'yo ay ibang tao. Okay? Pagka ikaw ay nasa labas pa ng relationship na yan, ng konsepto ng pagkatao, mababaw ang antas ng relasyon. At pag ikaw ay nakapasok na sa loob, then malalim. Okay? Ang pagkakaroon ng resilience sa ating konsepto ng pagkataong Pilipino is also related dun sa direction ng mula sa labas, pupunta ka patungo sa loob. At pagkatapos nito, meron din siyang babaw at lalim at meron din siyang makitid at malawak, a narrow point of view and a larger scope. And then at the core of all this is kapwa, which I will discuss one by one. There are various levels of interaction. As I mentioned earlier, merong isang level na medyo mababaw, ito yung ibang tao. Ito yung iba-ibang antas nito, pakikitungo, transaction or civility with, pakikisalamuha, pakikilahok, pakikibagay at pakikisama. Sa iba-ibang antas na to, mula sa labas, unti-unti ay pumapasok na tayo sa loob. Kapag tayo ay nakapasok na sa loob, dito sa levels of interaction and interconnectedness, which is an aspect of relationships, tayo ay magiging hindi na ibang tao. Meron tayong antas ng pagtutunguhan ng pakikipagpalagayang loob, a level of mutual trust and understanding and acceptance, and pakikisangkot, getting involved with, or pakikiisa. Notice that once pumasok na tayo sa loob, tayo ay nagre-resonate or tayo ay pumapasok sa isang elemento ng resilience at i-discuss ko ngayon yan dito. Ito po ay isang value structure. The idea here is to connect resilience to Filipino behavior patterns and value structures as elucidated by Enriquez. And there are 3 layers here: the surface value, the core value, and the societal value. So we have at the surface value, the usual values that we seem to hear a lot about: hiya, utang na loob, and pakikisama. These are some of the surface values elaborated by Dr. Enriquez. Then we have the confrontative value or confrontative surface value, bahala na, sama at lakas ng loob at pakikibaka. And then we have the pivotal interpersonal value, which is pakikiramdam, and the core value, which is kapwa. Sorry, I will just rush to this in the interest of time, but let me take 3 points one by one in this diagram. Okay. There are also linking socio-personal values. There are associated societal values, and there are reductionist and functional interpretations of these values. I'll take this one by one. I would like to look at the connection to resilience in the concept of laob, in the concept of kapwa, and in the concept of pakikiramdam. So let me take loob. Loob is salitang bukal sa Pilipinong karanasan ng pagpapakatao. Ang ano po rito ay isang magandang libro ni Father Alejo na Tao po Tuloy. Ibig sabihin, ang daan patungo sa loob. Paano po tayo papasok sa loob? Tuloy kayo, ito po ang sagot dito, tao po, tuloy kayo, tao kayong pumarito, tao rin naman kaming dinatnan nyo, ipagpalagay nyo na lang ang inyong loob, kapwa tao. Ito po ay isang daan ng pagpasok sa loob at ito naman po ang definition ng loob na gusto kong i-connect sa ating resilience. Loob is connected to inner will, is connected to inner self. And therefore, ang qualities po ng taong may dala-dala nito sa loob ng pagkataong Pilipino ay yung tinatawag nating inner strength or inner will. So dito po lumilitaw ang mga salitang lakas ng loob, tibay ng loob, sama ng loob. At pagkatapos po nito ay meron tayong konsepto ng pagpasok sa kalooban, what lies within. Dito po natin makikita ang pinanggagalingan o source ng resilience. At kapag ito po ay ninakaw, ang tawag po dyan ay nilooban tayo o pag tayo po ay winalanghya o nilapastangan ng ating loob, tayo po ay nilooban. Hindi po tayo ninakawan, nilooban po tayo. Because there is an inner part of us that is taken away. So this resonates with resilience and the depth of what lies within the personhood or kalooban. Corollary to this, we have to discuss societal values which we have associated with this. Kabutihang loob, which is goodness inside. Kagandahang loob, which is beauty inside. And kalinisang loob, cleanliness inside or being pure inside. Now let me connect this now to the core value of kapwa. Kapwa is the element or important element of a shared identity. This is part of what we call the collectivist societies or the contextualized society. It is the unity of the self and the other. In other words, there is no dichotomy between the self and the other. In other words, I and you are together. And if you notice the words kita or kata in other languages, you will see the dual I and you. But also there is the we, I, you, and we together, which is the same as kapwa. If we use the behavioral component of pakikipagkapwa-tao together with pagpapakatao, it means treating the other as a fellow human being. It means pwede tayong lahat ng klaseng relationships, kapatid, kasama, kaibigan, kabiyak, kamag-anak, kasangga, kaaway, at kabit. Ibang tao at hindi ibang tao ay pareho ring kapwa. Resonates again with resilience when we look at the dynamics of resilience in everyday life. It is understanding a level of trust, a level of comfort, a level of disclosure, and a level of consent and physical and social distance. Also important in these Filipino values and virtues, connecting it to resilience, is the whole notion of pakiramdam. Pakiramdam is not only feeling, loosely translated, but rather it is the use of all our sensory perceptions physically. Pakigamit ang iyong pangdama. So pakiramdam. Please feel or please use your senses, and it means a shared inner perception, a heightened sensitivity, a feeling for the other, okay? Pakiramdam, nakikiramdam, karamdaman. It is an emotional a priori that goes with Filipino personhood and operates behind all Filipino values. The steering emotion triggers the spontaneous voluntary actions that come with the sharing of the self and service to other. And notice that in the elements of resilience, we find this concern or sensitivity to the other. Let me now use an example of some research that has used this resilience model. And I'm going to explain in a few slides only how this model works. There is a growing shift now from a vulnerability model in understanding children to a resilient model on child abuse and child protection issues. Children are viewed as having the capacity to cope, adapt, and overcome traumatic experiences rather than as weak, passive, helpless, dependent, and incapable of doing things. They are considered active agents in their own development and not as passive victims of adversities. Again, this resonates with resilience. The concept of resilience is often associated with successful adaptation, well-being, positive functioning, and competence in the face of uncertainty, chronic stress, and prolonged severe trauma. Let me just explain that in this study, Bautista et al., attention was given towards strengthening resilience to child abuse and exploited children by focusing on two elements, the risk and protective factors. The study presents narratives of abused children that reveal their courage, resourcefulness, and capacity to cope with distressing situations, even without receiving intervention from outside sources. Manifestations of resilience were extracted from the children's stories. Building resilience is to understand the activities that deplete our energy and those that help us bounce back to support recovery in life. It helps us expand our window of tolerance and helps us identify the signs when we find ourselves out of this zone and do something about it. In other words, according to Bautista, a more dynamic and complex nature presents resilience as a process of interaction and negotiation. Resilient children are those who can adjust to different situations in life, who possesses problem-solving skills, who assumes control over their lives, and more importantly, remain hopeful about the future. Let me just now walk you through, and this will be almost like the last slide, resilient themes in the narratives of Filipino children. Accepting and adjusting to the demands of difficult situations. This was found by Bautista. Competent functioning among difficult problems. Learning from adversities. Making the self as teacher and source of valuation. Pagtitiis and seeing things in perspective. Finding happiness in the midst of difficulties. Keeping sane in the face of traumatic experiences. Keeping a good and wholesome character and self amidst deprivation. Having an ethical mindset, recovering from past wounds, therapeutic construction of reality, being other-centered, seeing situations as temporary, and resisting temptations. There you are in terms of resilience themes, in terms of the studies on child abuse. And lastly, I would just like to point out that a lot of the programs on mental health that we want to go for and the themes of resilience basically ask these last questions. How do we, if these are all the resilient elements that we have found in our studies, how do we enhance and build resilience among children? In our efforts to build youth resilience, we should aim to strengthen young people development and supporting youth to reach their full potential within the framework of their possibilities and resources. Livelihood and vocational skills are essential for a self-sufficient and financially secure future for any young person growing to adulthood. And finally, life skills such as building up self-esteem, managing emotions, promoting positive self-image, negotiation skills, problem solving, critical thinking, and decision-making. determine whether a young person's knowledge and experiences are put to use in a constructive way for the individual and society. These skills also influence to what extent a young person is able to assimilate the content from school-based and other programs that we are implementing. Thank you very much. Yun lamang po at maraming salamat sa inyong lahat.
Thank you, Dr. De Castro, for that very informative presentation on cultural roots of well-being and resilience, highlighting Filipino values and concepts on mental health. Our third speaker is Dr. Darwin Dasig. Dr. Dasig is the president of the Dementia Society of the Philippines and a faculty at the Department of Physiology and Neurosciences in UP College of Medicine. He is also a fellow of the Philippine Neurological Association, a board member of the Asian Society Against Dementia, and the chair of from the Department of Neurosciences, Makati Medical Center. Dr. Dasig will be presenting the neuroscience of well-being and resilience.
Good morning. For this session, we will discuss the neural basis of well-being and resilience, specifically with regards to the effect of the brain on genetics, stress, positive environment, biological systems, and neural circuitry of the cognitive and emotional components of the brain. Allow me to begin by citing the definition of mental health from our Mental Health Act, which is the state of well being in which the individual realizes one's own abilities and potentials, copes adequately with the normal stresses of life, displays resilience in the face of extreme life events, works productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a positive contribution to the community. For definition of terms, stress is the imbalance between the perceived demands placed on an individual and his or her perceived capability to deal with the demands, while coping refers to the strategy that an individual adopts to deal with the stressor. Resilience is adapting or bouncing back after being exposed to stressful situations or adversity, with the absence of psychiatric symptoms despite negative life events, and well being is satisfaction with life. This is the schema that I will refer to in order to discuss the neural basis of well being and resilience, and I will go through it part by part. Let me start with genetics, which is to a certain extent who we are, and which is a product of millions of years of evolution that allowed the organism to maximize its capability to survive. So, genetics affect the brain, and the role of the genes in inheritance information of human characteristics and behavior in health and disease has been recently well researched, including the Human Genome Project. The role of the genes in stress response, coping mechanisms of individuals, development of pathological states, neurological and psychiatric conditions have been researched in twin studies, genome-wide association studies, and polygenic scoring. The Group of Choi in 2019 have proposed three complementary working definitions of psychological resilience in order to study the effect of genetics on resilience, to wit, capacity, process, and outcome. In terms of capacity, this involves traits that index positive psychological strengths and that do not require adversity to be present, but do exert beneficial effects when adversity occurs. Examples of this include positive affect or tendency to experience positive emotions, cognitive abilities including intelligence, personality traits such as conscientiousness and extroversion, which are now associated with the corresponding genetic characteristic. They also involve multiple traits, which are individual traits representing components or ingredients of resiliency. In a study, for example, of 304 independent loci linked to a well being spectrum to gene expression in the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus, and enrichment for GABA related interneurons, show this as an example. The other definition would be processes, including presence of challenge or adversity, example of which is polygenic risk scores for psychopathology that interact with life adversities to influence conditions such as depression or the presence of protective processes. For example, the prospective cohort of U.S. Army soldiers showing unit cohesion, reducing risk for new onset depression, even for individuals with high polygenic risk for depression. And lastly, in terms of outcome, examples would be absence of psychiatric disorder with exposure to adversity in a study with the absence of new onset psychiatric disorders in U.S. Army soldiers who experience high levels of deployment related trauma exposure. This identified a genome-wide significant locus in the participants. So genetics does affect the brain, but also in terms of epigenetic susceptibility, where epigenetics is a study of changes in the organisms caused by modification of gene expression versus alteration of the genetic code. So that the final phenotype of a person is much the outcome of the genetic makeup as the environmental influences throughout a person's life. Recent areas of research have shown that linking molecular mechanisms with many forms of mental illness include DNA methylation and histone modification. Studies on genetic and environmental factors cause global and gene specific modifications which account for a number of mental illnesses. So, genetics with epigenetic susceptibility modify the brain. And this stresses throughout life from fetal prenatal stage, early life, and rest of adulthood influence and modify the phenotype of the individual within the dictates of the person's genetic information. So many psychiatric and neurological disorders are highly polygenic from many hundreds of genes, and the individual's risk of developing disorder from genetic factors are further modified by a range of other factors from the environment, including stress, bereavement, and physical illness. So we will be discussing this interaction between nature and nurture throughout the whole session. So stress. We have defined stress as the imbalance between the perceived demands placed on an individual and his or her perceived capability to deal with the demands. But physiologically, it can be defined also as a chemical or physical disturbance in the cells or tissue fluids produced by a change occurring either in the external environment or within the body itself that requires a response to counteract the disturbance. So we humans are walking units that need to maintain for survival our narrow internal milieu. So the whole process involves homeostasis or the maintenance of a constant and optimal internal environment of the body. And a stress or stressor is anything that challenges that. Hans Selye, as far back as 1936, noted that animals responded to injury or even perceived threat of injury with a constellation of changes independent of the stimulus. He referred to this as the general adaptation syndrome, wherein there's a response to a pattern for the stresses or stressors. And two pathways that mediate stress response were identified: the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal cortex axis, or HPA, wherein the release of corticotropin releasing hormone and adrenocorticotropic hormone act on the adrenal cortex to secrete hormones, particularly glucocorticoids. The other pathway is the sympathetic adrenal medulla system, where activation of the locus coeruleus catecholamine system would release norepinephrine and epinephrine. So these two pathways work in parallel, producing corticosteroids on the other hand and norepinephrine and other neurotransmitters on the other, which would facilitate adaptive behavioral pathways, inhibit non-adaptive behavioral pathways, adapt redirection of energy, and contain the response. Later, this was modified that the response really depended on the type of stressor that is encountered by the organism. And there it can be a difference in terms of control, striving, or loss of control. If the stressor is surmountable, wherein the organism maintains control, the main transmitter releases norepinephrine, including others like testosterone and oxytocin. In this situation, the organism is able to thrive and even able to develop further the brain. On the other hand, if the stress is a distressful stressor, then the response will be striving. The main transmitter will be adrenaline in order to respond in terms of fleeing or fighting. And as you can see with adrenaline, this increases the heart rate, the blood pressure, increases the glucose for fuel of the brain and the muscle, and increases free fatty acids from lipid metabolism in order to serve as energy source for muscle. All of these are risk factors for vascular diseases, for example, including cardiovascular and cerebrovascular disease. Then, lastly, a severe distressful stressor, which the organism would want to run away from or fight but could not, would show a loss of control. And the main environment is categorized by increase in corticosteroid. This is not different from the situation in a depressed individual. So it is not surprising with our prolonged stress, particularly the stressful stress, that the overwhelming stress and inability of the organism to respond to it correctly can lead to stress related disease like hypertension, atherosclerosis, sudden cardiac death, migraine, tumor growth, aging, and dementia. In terms of the action of glucocorticoids, it is supposed to be an immunosuppressive action, which would counter-regulate the effects of inflammation and immunity in order to prevent overreaction. However, if it is overwhelming, especially if prolonged, this can depress the phagocytic activity of the reticuloendothelial system and ultimately leads to decreased host resistance and increased susceptibility to infection, causing a tendency for infectious diseases, as well as disorders related to decreased surveillance, as in malignancies, to proliferate. So, stress, lifelong stressors, and adversity exposure could be seen as detrimental to the brain. But even early on, the stressors can already affect the brain, for example, during prenatal uh, development and early life. So you can see the effect in terms of the stages of life with stress. Prenatal stressors in the study by Glover have shown that maternal stress during pregnancy increases risk of child to alter neurodevelopmental outcomes. It has been said that in stressful environmental thousands of years ago, this may have been adaptive for our ancestors to have children who were more vigilant and anxious or with readily distracted attention, ADHD. But in the modern world, several of these changes can be maladaptive and can cause problems for the child and their family. So Serpelloni et al. In 2019 did a study showing mental health and epigenome-wide DNA methylation in saliva following intimate partner violence, IPV, during pregnancy in a Brazilian city with high levels of violence. The mothers, of course, showed elevated depression, PTSD, and anxiety symptoms. But interestingly, the children who were exposed to prenatal stress had similar psychiatric problems after being born. They were able to show genomic sites in genes encoding glucocorticoid receptor and its repressor among the most differentially methylated and indicated an enhanced ability to terminate hormonal stress responses in prenatally stressed children. And children had more DNA methylation in heterochromatin-like regions, which previously had been associated with stress disease resilience. How about early life? Nelson's group showed adversity in childhood linked to mental and physical health throughout life, with behavioral consequences, including with childhood exposure to adversity resulting in a variety of behavioral and emotional problems, increased risk taking, aggressive behavior, involvement in violence, difficulties in relationship with others, development of post traumatic stress disorder. Children experiencing trauma, for example, witnessing murder of a family member or sexual assault, uh, has showed elevated risk of psychiatric disorders, including depression, PTSD, conduct problems, substance abuse, self harm, suicidal thoughts, and attempts. And physical and psychological abuse in early childhood were associated with eating disorders, mental health issues affecting typical development and education. In terms of neurobiological consequences, the structural and functional differences in brain development were associated with environmental stressors, no? Low socioeconomic status, physical abuse, caregiving neglect. For example, exposure to maternal stress in infancy reduced electroencephalographic brain activity. Profound psychosocial deprivation showed differences in overall brain volume, reductions in white and gray matter volume in several brain areas, with reduction in brain electrical activities and decreased executive function. In terms of physical consequences, early exposure to adversities like poverty reduced the brain volume and altered functional connectivity. Childhood adversities showed a greater risk of adult chronic conditions, including cardiovascular disease, stroke, cancer, asthma, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, kidney disease, diabetes, overweight, or obesity, depression, increased health risk behaviors. The effects are mediated directly with altered regulation of stress signaling pathways and immune system function, and the dysregulation of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis discussed earlier. What is the impact of stress on the structure of the adolescent brain? Brain areas have been noted to continue to develop during adolescence, including amygdala, which has been associated with fear, the development of the perception of fear, hippocampus, much associated with memory and learning, and the prefrontal cortex, important for executive function, insight, and judgment. So, animal studies have shown alteration in the development of this during the early developmental years. But human studies have shown for boys and girls aged 8 and 14 years of age that post traumatic stress symptoms associated with relatively high levels of circulating cortisol showed a decreased hippocampal volume compared to healthy controls. It is interesting to note that stress has been identified as a significant risk factor for the development of dementia, which is associated with cerebral atrophy. The prefrontal cortex has shown remarkable changes during adolescence. First, increased volume observed from childhood to onset of puberty, followed by a period of cortical thinning into young adulthood. So this involves synaptic pruning and programmed cell death, which is an improvement in the synaptic connection for function of the prefrontal cortex. Those that were exposed to significant stress have been shown to have significant changes in the structure, particularly of the adult medial prefrontal cortex. So, stress is a negative factor on the brain, especially because with increasing response, there comes a time when the person can no longer respond properly and therefore will uh, decompensate. So part of the injury response might be maladaptive with pathogenesis of diseases and their morbidity. So stress is important within a certain range, but beyond that, it might suppress and enhance. It might suppress the beneficial features and enhance catabolism and lead to organ dysfunction. Positive environment is the balancing effect on stress. And the positive environment of physical activity, environmental influences are all related to neuronal plasticity. So much has been written about physical activity, exercise, promoting neuronal plasticity, which is an increase in the function and synaptic connections among the neurons. Environmental influences are also very important as they promote the proper environment through which the nervous system will thrive. Now, it is note that social animals like humans, social interactions are very fundamental to enhancing other pleasure. That's why humans are intensely social, and one of the most important factors for happiness is social relationships with other people. That's why support from family, from peers, from community is very important in terms of enhancing brain function. The biological systems involve the systems that are outside of the brain but promote its well being. We have discussed the HPA system, neuroendocrine system, that controls homeostasis for the uh, conservation of the internal milieu. But another important factor is chronobiology, which is the response to time of functions of the organism, which is dictated by natural selection through evolution. So the circadian day-night activities of an organism develop as an evolutionary strategy to success. The predators, of course, work better at night, but we sleep at night and thrive during the day. And this has been encoded in the genes and promoted by our circadian rhythm, which is a rotating repertoire of drives and their concomitant behaviors controlled by a clock. And we can see that with the global village and call centers, disorders are being noted with a disrespect of the circadian rhythm. We have always thought that homeostasis is the driving force of physiological function. Now we realize that this is actually a fine tuner when the fluctuations in the local environment from the main controller occurs. Lastly, the immune system and mental health have to be emphasized. No, that as based on Branslett's insight, the immune system and nervous system are actually artificially separated. Both use signal molecules called cytokines in the immune system and neurotransmitters in the nervous system. And the signal molecules actually transmit with each other. So a good nervous system promotes a good immune system, while a good immune system promotes a good nervous system. Lastly, will be the neural circuitry involving the cognitive and emotional components of brain function. So we have cognitive processes that are artificially again separated into neuroanatomical structures for the sensory function, mental manipulation, language, memory, visual spatial orientation, executive function, and motor. These are all important for the brain in order to integrate the functions of the different organ systems, again, to promote internal milieu, and for the organism to interact with the external environment to get the proper nutrients in order to maintain the internal milieu. And the workings of that, with the promotion of neuronal plasticity, increases the functionality of the brain. Often neglected in terms of neuroanatomical and neurophysiological considerations is the emotional system. The emotion is actually very important in terms of determining reasoning and executive function that will promote the integrity of the organism. And in terms of emotion, the driving force is actually happiness. And this has been discussed thousands of years ago, way back with Aristotle, who defined happiness in terms of two aspects, hedonia or pleasure, and eudaimonia, a life well lived. Psychology has discussed it, and positive psychology has thoroughly researched this in terms of engagement. So positive psychology have identified six variables that predict happiness and life satisfaction, including positive self-esteem, sense of perceived control, extroversion, optimism, positive social relationships, and a sense of meaning and purpose to life. So what bridges the pleasure to meaning? Both hedonia and eudaimonia. Uh, One important part of the brain is the brain default network, which represents the self and which becomes active when we are introspective and reflective. So hedonic spots, pleasure spots, have either close link with the frontal cortical structures or belong to the brain's default network. and this interact with certain areas of emotional and self-relevant information parts of the brain and improves the functioning of the nervous system. So this is the distribution of the brain default network. And we have shown experimentally that positive emotions increase life satisfaction by building resilience. So happiness is a composite of life satisfaction, coping resources, and positive emotion, which predicts desirable life outcomes in many domains. In the broaden and build theory, the positive emotions help build lasting resources, predicted increases in both resilience and life satisfaction, mediated the relation between baseline and final resilience. So this schema shows that with the genetics providing the basic mold, we are modified by the stress, negative parts, and the positive environment that works on our cognitive process, emotional systems, and biological systems that would promote insight, judgment, behavior, mindfulness, and consciousness. So let me end with this. Hate no one, no matter how much they've wronged you. Live humbly, no matter how wealthy you become. Think positively, no matter how hard life gets. Give much, even if you have been given little. Forgive all, especially yourself. And never stop praying for the best for everyone. For this indeed has its biological neural basis. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Dasik, for that very educational presentation on the neurological perspective of resilience and well-being. And finally, we have Dr. Violeta Bautista, Professor Emeritus of the Department of Psychology from the UP College of Social Sciences and Philosophy, and the chair of today's webinar. Dr. Bautista will be presenting the indigenization and measurement of well-being.
Magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. Good morning to everyone. I'm pleased to be here with you in this second summit to share with you my paper with the title Indigenization and Measurement of Well-Being. It is very important that we study and measure well-being, especially at this time of our history as a nation. The government is organizing a comprehensive mental health program in response to the mandate of the Mental Health Law of 2018. Well-being is at the heart of mental health. Our mental health law uses a modified WHO definition of mental health and defines mental health as a state of well-being. According to RA 11036, mental health refers to a state of well-being in which individuals realize their own abilities and potentials, cope adequately with the normal stresses of life, display resilience in the face of extreme life events, work productively and fruitfully, and are able to make a positive contribution to the community. Mental health then is not only about the absence of mental illness. It is also importantly about well-being. So as we grow in understanding of well-being, we also develop measures for it so we can better assess the mental health needs of our people, identify areas in their lives needing support and intervention, determine the efficacy of our interventions, develop theories of well-being as we see factors correlated with it, do with such theories more reliable predictions and interventions, and provide with well-being matrix better inputs to government policy. Essential to measurement is validity. Validity asks, are we measuring that which we intend to measure? To measure is to also clarify the concept, construct, or phenomenon we aim to measure. We can then explore the means that best allows us to measure such phenomenon. The work is not easily laid out for us. In spite of much research done on well-being, there remains debates on how to conceptualize and measure it. Considering the literature, mostly Western, here are some points we need to ponder. One, there is no one definition of well-being. The construct having many aspects to it. Meanings include that which is non-instrumentally or ultimately good for a person, something everyone seemingly aims for and arguably has a right to, that which constitutes a good form of life, a life where there is maximum pleasure and self-interest, where there is economic affluence measured by gross domestic product, that which is more than economic affluence and positive affect, but includes feeling fulfilled and developing as a person, that it is a subjective and includes cognitive evaluation of life being satisfying side by side with predominance of positive emotions, where there is life satisfaction, happiness, and flourishing, or where there is positive emotions, engagements, relationships, meaning and purpose, and accomplishments. Number two, major approaches to studying and measuring well-being pervade current approaches.
We are experiencing a bit of a technical difficulty. We will wait for the technical staff to fix.
You have to, that's advanced, go back. You go back. Go back. Ang layo na. Ayan, okay. You could, no, some more. Forward na, forward. Forward pa. Forward. The next one. The next one. Yan, okay. Nawala ang audio. And those that see well-being as developing out of a set of psychological functions and processes. Number three, well-being studies have addressed the total well-being or aspects of it, and those that refer to its aspects identify those aspects in various ways, such as mental well-being, emotional well-being, social and emotional well-being, and even psychological well-being. Number four, the kind of measure we develop, use, will depend on our purposes or reasons for measurement. Five, our measure needs to be valid and reliable, but they should also be cost efficient and easy to use. And lastly, understanding and measurement of well-being need to be culturally relevant. Well-being consists of patterns of thinking, sensing, feeling, behaving, and valuing, which are influenced by culture. Different culture groups may have different ways of understanding and experiencing well-being. For instance, the Cree people of Eo, Itchi, in the eastern James Bay region of northern Quebec, has the concept of miu piemat tisium, referring to a broad perspective that could be translated as being well, cited in a study. Mia Pitshun considers not only physical health, but also psychological, social, and political well-being, and recognizes health within the context of land and identity. Based on this concept, the Cree Board of Health and Social Science Services of James Bay decided to use the word myopimatism instead of health in communication with other bodies to introduce its programs and communities. In Australia, a strong multi-sectorial commitment to indigenous communities has also led to the reclamation and development of models of well-being. Joseph Rowe developed the concept of Aboriginal inner spirit, or Nyarlu or Lian, which in turn inspired the development of the strong spirit, strong mind, well-being model. This model articulates the importance of strengthening the inner spirit to enhance good decision making and support behavioral change at the individual, family, and community levels. For the Aboriginal people of Australia, Kurunpa is the foundation of vitality and is critical to the physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. Kurunpa goes beyond metaphor. It's not only a feeling or a means of expressing distress. It is the vessel of life force itself. Now, the people of Bhutan have propounded their own version of well-being, expressed in their concept of gross national happiness, GNH. In the 1970s, the king of Bhutan mandated that happiness and not gross national product should be the goal of their country's sustainable development. So their GNH drew inspiration from the Buddhist teachings on the middle path and is characterized by balanced development, recognizing both the material and intangible aspects of well-being, is ecocentric rather than egocentric, and acknowledges the interconnectedness of the web of life. The following figure that you see on the screen presents Bhutan's concept of GNP. Now, all these developments are examples of indigenization process at work. So what is indigenization? It is both a movement and a process of arriving at knowledge. Many social scientists have become more circumspect in adopting methods from a former milieu for application in their own countries. This is especially true in countries that have been dominated by Western academic traditions. Experience and eventually formal studies have shown that knowledge derived from abroad may not necessarily be appropriate, sabi nga, hindi hiyang when locally adopted. For Pikren, indigenization is the process whereby a local culture develops its own forms of knowledge and practice, either by developing it from within that culture or by importing knowledge and practices from elsewhere and combining them with local concepts. Applied to mental health studies, indigenization can develop knowledge, systems, and discourses from perspectives and methodologies of the indigenous people. Now, indigenous here can refer to original inhabitants of the land, such as the Maoris and the Aitas, or to people residing in a society like the Filipinos in the Philippines or the Chinese in China, etc. Rooting our mental health knowledge system on the indigenous can provide a sound basis for a deep and resonant practice of well-being. Now, the Philippines has profited from indigenization under the Psikologiyang Filipino movement. More work, however, needs to be done to measure well-being from the indigenous perspective. In this regard, we know two works, one already finished and another in progress, that looks at well-being from the view of the culture bearers. I will summarize these two studies as useful examples of indigenization. One is CSIP and Associates Filipino Wellbeing Scale. Uh, they regard well-being in general as that which constitutes the good life. They reviewed the literature, both foreign and local, and did focus group discussions to determine the domains covered by a good life. Their scale comes in two parts. The first asks respondents to rate how important each item is for them to be able to say that their life is good. The second part asks respondents to rate how happy they are in relation to aspects of well-being mentioned in the questionnaire. There were 271 questions grouped into 4 blocks and 11 domains of well-being. I won't enumerate all those domains. They analyzed the data by comparing the two ratings across all items. Most certainly, the respondents' well-being will be in good condition if they are most satisfied with domains in their life that they also consider to be most important to them. However, there would be concern or even need for intervention if the respondents score low on scales they consider most important. Now, the results of the study shows that the good life for the respondents is not strongly defined by material goods or economic affluence, but rather by sound family relationships. Also of key importance is love of country and their faith in God and their spirituality. Now, what is of least importance would be having different vices and, interestingly, having leisure with friends. Domains that may need interventions are housing and quality of neighborhood, employment and quality of working life, savings, wealth and assets, physical health, information and knowledge, and government performance. Now, CSIP and Associates recognize that the length of the scale limits its use, 271 items. They see the scale to be most useful in tracking the well-being of the subjects across time to determine how they are doing in a comprehensive way and to determine the effectiveness of government interventions that may be put in place. Now, the second study is my work with Dr. Salvador on the development of the Ginhawa scale. The development of such scale follows the approach of indigenization from within and is based on the integration of insights from reviewing Philippine literature, from lexical domain analysis, and client narratives from our client and community-based work. My attention to Ginhawa came early from hearing narratives of my clients when they talk about their problems, their ups and downs in life, their deepest longings, and also their experience in therapy. They always use the word Ginhawa there. I also noted that within the therapist-client relationship, my client and I were both able to sense and encounter each other through what we sense of each other's Ginhawa. So I pursued my study of Ginhawa as I read Philippine literature on the subject and studied the usage of the word even outside the mental health related work. So in 2020, Dr. Salvador and I put together a well-being scale based on the Ginhawa framework that has evolved from my study. Here are some themes about Ginhawa that guided our development of the Ginhawa scale. One, Ginhawa is an indigenous concept that can be considered equivalent to well-being. This is what Paz, a scholar in ethnolinguistics, learned about Ginhawa. Paz studied the Ginhawa in different ethnolinguistic groups in the Philippines and learned that among the Tagalogs, the word is usually associated with prosperity, sense of feeling light and easy, absence of want or pressure, condition where every aspect of life is in their place, experiencing peace in their life and ability to breathe freely, easily, and freedom from serious life difficulties and pressures. It may also be related to similar words in other ethnic groups in the country that all mean to breathe. These include Maginhawa in Hiligaynon, Romblamanon, and Sorsoganon, Moginhawa in Cebuano, Guminhawa in Aklanon and Waray, Mangisnawa in Kapampangan, and Manginanawa in Sambal. Number two, Ginhawa is an embodied experience associated with the spirit and with the maintenance of life and vitality. Salazar, in his 1977 study of historical documents, noted that Ginhawa was connected to the spirit or kaluluwa. He said that in the Austronesian view, there were two types of spirits, the kaluluwa kalag that inhabited the head and had intellectual and moral powers, and Ginhawa localized in the internal organs, which had to do with life and vitality and was connected with breath. He also noted the connection between breath and ginhawa found in the Old Visayan dictionary. Because breath is the primary sign of life, then the presence of absence of ginhawa also serves as indicator of strong or compromised vitality, life in the old Filipino consciousness. Tan noted that for Salazar, vitality, life that flows with one's breath is not only physical life, but merges with the spirit or psychic energy of the person. Number three, ginhawa may be understood as the felt embodied experience of a whole person. Such experience being accessed and understood through its four dimensions, such as sigla, gana, gaan, and ligaya. So sigla is the physical and psychic energy that helps us take on the challenges of life. Gana is the appetite and enthusiasm for life. So we describe a person who is psychologically integrated to have ganang kumain, ganang magtrabaho, even ganang chumika. Gana also has to do with effectiveness and potency at work. So a person who we admire because he or she is put together can be described when working to be gumagana sa trabaho. And then the third dimension is that of gaan. That is the ease by which we go through life. Gaan has intrapsychic and interpersonal dimensions. So people who are come across as mentally healthy are also described as magaang magdala ng buhay. And they're also sought after as friends and co-workers because they are magaang kasama. And lastly is ligaya, which is the consequences of living life well. Okay, ligaya can be experienced as sensate pleasure, peace and sense of well-being despite difficulties in life, and happiness that comes from having accepted the self and having a sense of purpose. Number four, ginhawa is a positive experience that is able to find its way in experiences of darkness, peril, difficulties, and pain. The study by PAS and the results of the larangang lexical of ginhawa indicate that ginhawa is a positive concept. One finds the dominance of the following clusters of thoughts in answers to most of the questions raised in the larangang lexical study, such as the gaan cluster, associated with peace, calmness, contentment, the gumagana or effectiveness potency cluster, relationship cluster that has to do with loved ones and kapwa as recipients of such effectiveness and as context for experiencing ginhawa, and the place cluster. There are places that are nakakaginhawa and there are places that are made to bring ginhawa. So ginhawa also finds its way in the narratives of hurting people. Interesting are narratives that speak of ginhawa even in the midst of difficulties, just like nowadays during the pandemic. Equally interesting are narratives of guilt and regret about inability to do enough to have others experience the kind of ginhawa they have. Number five, ginhawa as a term is not vulnerable to stigmatizing stereotypes and conditioned negative attitudes towards words associated with mental. Because of the dominance of the medical model in the field of mental health, there is a tendency for anything mental to be associated with mental illness, mental hospitals, and psychopathology. Ginhawa does not carry any of such cultural baggage. Six, ginhawa is both a process and an outcome. These courses on ginhawa indicate that it is a highly valued condition within and around a person that invites goal-directed behavior. Once achieved, it does not remain in a static state. It changes. There are times when its presence is strongly experienced. There are times when it is barely felt. It is an experience condition that a person strives for and can be nurtured, diminished, or increased and shared. Number 7, ginhawa does not only serve itself. It serves and is served by other values and conditions in Philippine culture. Andres Bonifacio and Emilio Jacinto mentions the return to the ginhawa of the pre-Spanish period, which can only be attained through Filipinos loving their country. In everyday discourse, it is something that, when experienced, it is also shared. Feeling so is a cause for regret. Failing so is a cause for regret. More broadly, it can also be achieved with help from the spirit world and by social interaction maintained by nature or the environment. Number 9, ginhawa is a whole person experience. The body, mind, emotions, spirit, behaviors, and relationships can be affected and can manifest siglagaan, gana, and ligaya. Narratives say that ginhawa is affected by factors like time, place, and stressors, but is not wholly controlled by them. Thus, the repeating narrative, may ginhawa, gayong may pagsubok at paghihirap. Lastly, it is open to empirical studies and measurement. Dr. Salvador and I are working on a ginhawa scale using Siglagana, Gaan, and Ligaya as ginhawa subscales. We administered the tool as part of the online sign-up Google form for UPD PsychServe's telepsychotherapy services, covering the months of May to June 2021. Respondents are students and employees of UP Diliman. The assessment has a total of 31 items and were presented in English. Using Pearson's correlation, we computed for item total correlations of the scale items, and they were moderate to high. We will next compute for principal component analysis. We have also lined up studies to determine the scale's construct validity. We are also currently using the ginhawa framework in conducting mental health programs such as community-based addiction program, university-based psychosocial programs, and mental health programs in the workplace. We have found the discourse on ginhawa within these programs to be meaningful and resonant with people's experiences. Now, this makes sense to us since ginhawa, being an indigenous concept, likely allowed people to access and understand culturally mediated nuances of the experience of being a whole, integrated human being. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bautista, for the presentation, providing insights on the measurement of well-being that is very unique and local. But before we proceed with the much-awaited portion of the activity, which is the open forum or the Q&A portion, may we request all of our speakers and all of the members of the panel to please turn on their cameras for a quick photo op as requested. And we will ask the tech to please help us with the capture of the photos of all of our panelists. Makita ka, sir. Hello po. May we request all of our panelists to please open their cameras if it's possible. So we will have a photo op. Thank you. Sir Marlon, are we good?
Yes po, Sir Mads.
Okay.
Okay po.
Can we have the moderators join us too?
Moderator.
Yes, please. Okay. Dr. Ong and Dr. Salvador.
Wala pong video.
Video is disabled.
Can you enable the video? It's currently disabled.
Ayan, nandiyan na po si Doc Ong. We'll still wait for Doc Salvador.
But is she around?
She is around po. Ayun. I think, ayan. Okay. So I guess this is the part wherein we need to plaster our smiles for tech team to screenshot. Okay, done. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And now, as we go to the much awaited portion of our activity, we would like to introduce our moderators. This session will be moderated to us by Dr. Michelle Ong and Dr. Divine Love Salvador. Dr. Ong is the chairperson of the Department of Psychology from UP College of Social Sciences and Philosophy, while Dr. Salvador is the head of the Clinical Psychology Program of the UP College of Social Sciences and Philosophy as well. Dr. Ong and Dr. Salvador, you now have full control of the session.
All right.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you for giving us full control. It's a very powerful, very powerful phrase. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good morning po to everybody.
Good morning, everyone.
Kami po ni Doc Mitch ang in charge sa present ng mga questions ninyo to our speakers. Doc Mitch, shall we begin?
Yes, we'd like to invite muna our participants, no? So we already have a few questions in line, no, dun sa ating Q&A. But if you have questions, pwede rin po sa chat. We'll also have a look at that. Pero kung maaari po sa Q&A para isang space lang siya and we can monitor more easily. But I think it's possible. Is it possible to ask our participants also to give their question live? Is that an option we are giving our participants as well? Yes. So
I
pwede
think so,
rin
ma'am.
po,
Yes.
kung gusto nyo nang i-turn on yung microphones, raise your hand po kung gusto niyo para makapag tanong po tayo sa ating panelists directly. So, Doc Devs, napaka malaman no nung discussion this morning. I really found it helpful as also as a beginning mental health researcher to have this sort of overview of the complexity of our conceptualization, our understanding of well-being, kung anong ibig sabihin nito at kung paanong napakahalaga na culturally situated, where at also merong appreciation for how yung genetics, no, and biological factors are also really important in our understanding of well-being and mental health. So we have a number of questions actually already from our participants, no, from early on in the discussion. So Doc Dips, would you like to start with
Sige.
one
Oo,
of our...
yung isang tanong, siguro i-summarize ko yung tatlo kasi ang tanong ni Angela, ni Dr.
Mhm.
Yu, kay Dr. Karandang.
Mhm.
So we start first with that. So the questions for Dr. Karandang would be who is accountable for well-being, considering that it includes individual and collective relationships. Tas kasama po sa tanong niya rin ay mukha daw pong nagfe-favor ng NCR yung skew nung sa Mentimeter kanina. So how do we actually define Filipino, or who is Filipino, and what efforts do we make or have been taken to build a theory that is truly Filipino and is unbiased in favoring the powerful or those who have the capacity to dictate the narratives.
Right. Dr.
Um,
Karanda?
Thank you, Dibs. Ang daming tanong yon. I think the question about geographic representation should be answered by the organizers of the webinar. Kami lang po ay na kumbida dito. Hindi po kami ang nagpresenta. At yung representation po natin ay depende po talaga kung sino din ang may interest. So, hindi po natin ipinamahagi po ito sa lahat, no? Sinong responsible? Tayong lahat. I'm a social scientist. I am not a biomedical person, unlike Dr. Dasig, who is a colleague in the UP College of Medicine, nor of Dr. Leonor Cabral Lim, no, who's also a physician. And I always emphasize, as I showed in my talk, that context matters. Our individual, personal, societal context is indeed important. And it defines your well-being. So kung ang konteksto mo ay naka-lockdown po tayo, nasa bahay po tayo ngayon, pero naiinis ka sa mga kasama mo sa bahay, may problema ka. At kailangan yung pag-usapan yun sa mga bahay-bahay natin, kung saan man tayo nandun. Kung ang konteksto mo naman ay nasa labas ka at nakakapaghanap buhay ka sa labas, iba din ang konteksto mo. So the context of where you live, how you experience it, is important. That's why the theme of my work has been on kagalingan, because I always believe that we could look at it in a positive light also, despite all of the challenges. And kagalingan as a well-being lens or approach means we live in harmony with our fellow men, with nature, and with the higher being. So there is a concept of relationality and sociality and having access to the good things in life. So meron ding material sufficiency and food security. So katulad po sa kwento ni Angel at ni Mark, kung wala po sila noong material sufficiency, food security, pero they are socially connected yet physically distant. They still had some sense of contentment, but they were not physically healthy. So each of us has our own context. Ako po ang nagpatakbo po ng poll questions kanina. So ito po yung mga sagot. Tinan niyo po ang sagot. Kung kamusta po kayo ngayon, mabuti naman po 59%. Mabeauty, I purposely put in a sense of humor this morning, 23%. Okay lang. Ano ba talaga yung okay lang? I'm really confused by that term of okay lang. No? Ano ba talaga yung okay lang? 16%. And unfortunately, merong hindi mabuti 1% at hindi mabeauty also 1%. The second question I also asked was, ano ba sa inyo ang pinakamahalaga para sa inyong kagalingan? So God was number 1, good health, family, safety, money, livelihood, and country po. Yun yung mga sunod-sunod. So lahat po yan ay iba't iba po ang ating level ng pagpapahalaga at lahat po yan ay nakaka-impluwensya sa ating kagalingan. Thank you po.
Thank you very much, Dr. Karandang.
Doc Mitch, meron ba tayong live na tanong or should we go
I
through the
think we
question?
can proceed, but I think before we go to the next question, meron lang akong practical question kasi po nire-raise din over and over sa chat. Baka we can ask the panelists and also the organizers for some clarification kasi marami pong nagtatanong dahil po sa napakahalaga at napakamalaman po ng mga talk, magkakaroon po ba ng uh, will the PowerPoints be available to them? Will the recordings be available to our participants as well? Is that something we can answer now?
Ako po, personally, I'd like to encourage you to watch the webinar again. It's available anyway on Facebook.
Right.
Para po
Opo.
maintindihan niyo po yung konteksto. So, I will not share my slides, but please just do watch the webinar again. At pwede
Okay.
niyong i-pause yung video pag kailangan yung namnamin uli yung mga pinagkwentuhan po namin ngayong umaga. Salamat
Right.
po.
Thank you po. Can we ask the organizers that or the tech people, gaano po ba katagal available online? Is it permanent there or is there a period that it's available online?
Good morning po. Marlon Alcantara po from DOH. Yung presentation po natin is will be uploaded, yung recorded, dun sa ating GDocs. Then the FB Live, katulad po ng sinabi ni Doc Nina, pwede po nilang panoorin ulit dun sa UP Telehealth po website. FB page, sorry. Opo.
Permanent po siya doon, sir? Sa page na yon.
Yes po,
That we can
opo.
return anytime. Okay, thank you, sir.
Opo.
Thank you, sir, for
Then
the
yung ano po,
clarification.
we will give the link mamaya dun
Okay.
sa chat box. We will share
Okay.
the link po. Yeah. Thank you po.
Thank you, Sir Marlon. So yun po para sa mga participants who earlier had questions about the availability of the recording or the PowerPoint. So it's not going to be distributed, but you can certainly revisit the recording anytime. Okay. Doc Divs, did you, we have a couple of people raising their hands.
Sure.
Oo.
Teka. It's hard to see the who they are. Kung sinong nauna pa. How do we... Is it okay if if I ask, kasi I noticed, so I'm trying to summarize, mukhang may several questions on language, Doc Mitch.
Okay, tama.
Let's have the speakers comment. Mukha pong merong concern, parang nagka-cluster yung ilang mga tanong dun sa usapin ng gaano daw kahalaga ang paggamit ng local languages o ng wika ng komunidad ng kultura sa mga pag-aaral pananaliksik pag-unawa tungkol sa well-being. And so for example, specifically, why do we continue to use Western terms? For example, like resilience, gayong ding even Western researchers are having difficulty pinning down its actual definition. So yun po yung clustering. So maybe invite any of our speakers to comment on the matter of language, the importance of local language in well-being research.
May I answer that?
Go ahead, Ma'am Beth.
Okay. I teach psychology of language, so siguro ako dapat ang sumagot dyan. Anyway, thank you for the question. In fact, underscoring the whole concept of Psikologiyang Pilipino and the idea of how we define the Filipino in the idea of mental health and well-being and resilience, I would like to underscore that language is a mirror of culture. And if we want to look at culturally valid, culturally appropriate, and culturally contextualized understandings of our well-being and resilience, I think we have to use the local languages as much as possible and then underscore local languages because there is not only one language in the Philippines. In fact, I'm reading in some of the comments on the Q&A, for example, that in some ways the Mentimeter is saying it's all NCR loaded, but still, of course, people will still criticize, and I hear this a lot. It's not only NCR or Metro Manila centric, but it is also Tagalog centric. Ano lang yan, pang Bulacan, Batangas, and pang Luzon speaking. So why is that important? Because, as I said again, language is a mirror of culture, and we do want to understand culture. And when we understand culture, the categories of analysis and the categories of the cognitive, affective, and behavioral manifestations of this are reflected in the languages that we use. For example, I'll give you an example, for example, in the word I love you. Okay? So translated literally, it is literally, ako, mahal, ikaw. Okay? Pero actually, pwede mong sabihin, mahal kita. Okay? And the supposed structure of that is, ang assumption mo ay may assumed I ka. May assumed subject ka na doon. I love you. Pero when translated, there is a very big difference in terms of how you would like to interpret this. In kita, it means I and you together. And therefore, there is the shared oneness of the I and the other. And therefore, it reflects a category of how you understand the direction of the love. Is it I love you one way, or you love me two ways? So in kita, there is an assumption of reciprocity, or an assumption that I will only say perhaps I love you if you might answer you love me too. Anyway, it's just an interpretation. And then why is it a mirror of culture again? It's also because culture, as we know it, and the categories for culture is looking at different ways of life. And if you look at different ways of lives and systems and behaviors related to this way of life, then you will understand what the behaviors are. Ang tawag nila dyan sa Pilipino ay kilos, ugali, asal, gawi. Okay? And there are different behavioral manifestations or actions related to these various categories. So, katulad rin ng sinabi ni Dr. Bautista, medyo nahan ko na siya doon sa kanyang point ng ginhawa, yung kanyang idea ng ginhawa na kinuha niya sa konteksto ng iba-ibang kultura na in-underscore din ni Dr. Karangdang in terms of context. We are a contextualized society. So if we don't understand the situation as expressed in language, then we cannot communicate what we want to say and what our thoughts, ideas, and feelings are. Okay. Why is it Tagalog-centric? It's not. I have to assure you that in a lot of ways, the history of psychology, which has started, Psicology Filipino, which started in the 70s, actually now there are a lot of studies and evidence that shows that there are various ethno-linguistic groups that has been studied, and there are also a lot of historical socio dimensions in the history of understanding Filipino behavior and culture.
Thank you, Dr. De Castro.
Thank you.
Si
Si
Ma'am,
Doc
yes,
Bolet
Doc Bo, yes, raised her hand also. Is it in relation to this question? Go ahead, Ma'am Bo. You're muted, ma'am.
You're
Can you-
muted pa. Muted.
All right. I guess the very point of this summit is to encourage researchers from different regions and ethnicity to reflect on their own culture. There would be maybe unexpressed, unarticulated construct that defines key concerns in mental health. For instance, aside from ginhawa, there is the concept of paglaom. In Tagalog, it is pag-asa. Okay, but how it comes across to native speakers, okay, of paglaom would be different. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I was schooled in Western psychology, and I grew up dreaming in English. But when I had a boyfriend who speaks in Filipino, and I got to appreciate our conversations in Filipino, then I started to dream in Filipino. And then it also becomes very true in the work that I do in clinical psychology.
I get to engage my clients more when I speak from their language. There is more resonance and reality in our encounter. Dr. Karandang speaks of being. So the ground of being is more real when you speak, engage each other in your native culture. That doesn't mean that we don't respect Western literature. It's knowledge arrived at their milieu. So eventually, indigenization, the goal of indigenization is really universal knowledge. So we find out what is true for all human beings as we compare what is indigenous across different countries, across different cultures. So there goes. So it's going to be a rejoicing in the multifaceted nature of life and culture. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Doc Bo.
Thank you.
Thank you po.
Gives there's there's a couple of questions around this framework no on wellness that I'd like to ask our panelists also kasi parang karugtong siya no nung pag-encourage natin for more research to be done on well-being and its factors from different perspectives or from different languages no and regions etc. So we have a question from one moment. John Michael Revilla, no, who asks, given that there are several views, several concepts, perspectives relevant to well-being, would you recommend a specific conceptual definition, like one definition of Filipino well-being that we should focus on as a community of researchers to help us better understand and improve Filipino well-being? Now, the other question is, I suppose, sort of an opposite direction or a different leaning. No? From Pierce Docena, we have several models, interventions related to well-being, such as ginhawa, bilog ng buhay, pagdadala, katatagan, kagalingan, etc. But these models are linked to specific, maybe individuals, groups, or academic institutions. Do you think that this diversity is an advantage? Or would it be better to aim for an overarching Filipino model? So parang, which direction do you think would be more productive for research? Yung multiplicity, yung pagpaparami, or is there a necessity for coming together around one model or one framework?
Yeah. Mitch?
Yes. Yes, please.
Itahi ko lang dyan, i-build on ko yung isa ring tanong na related dyan, yung galing kay John Revgilara naman. Ng pag-usapin ng kultura, how do we reckon with that given the increasingly multicultural naman daw ang Philippine culture?
Right.
So I think magkakatulad itong
Magkakaugnay,
mga tanong nito.
Anyone from the panel?
Doc Mitch and Doc Divs, no? Like I said earlier, the notions of health and well-being are emerging. So ito na yung multicultural, ito na yung diaspora natin ng mga Pilipino, ito na yung impluensya ng K-drama at BTS sa kulturang Pilipino. Lahat po yan, no? Kasama yan. And it's constantly influenced and reshaped by our circumstances, even our gender, power differentials, socio-economic disparities, lahat po yan na-apektuhan, no? So yung ating karanasan ng well-being, kalusugan, at pagkakasakit is both personal and social in nature. So ang homework ko po sa ating lahat ay how are health and well-being described and expressed, redescribed and restated and experienced. Kasi po ang philosophy ko dyan, it's emerging, it's constantly influenced and reshaped. So should we aim for one hegemony? I don't think so, because we have different sociocultural, personal context. But probably for Dr. Dasik and Dr. Cabral Lim, we're only talking about one human body. So from the biomedical perspective, baka they just want one. I'd like to put both doctors on the spot and ask them for their viewpoint.
It's always exciting when somebody from the panel puts other people on the panel on the spot.
Love it.
Dr. Desi, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Karandang, for incorporating me into the discussion. As you can see, my task was quite difficult because I had to come up with a theory of everything. No? similar to the ones of Einstein trying to integrate all the forces in the universe. So I
Mm.
tried my best to really show all the forces that are involved in the workings of the human brain
Mm.
to come up with the self. Now, let me just share some things. No, uh, in recent researches, we used to think that all decisions are made out of consciousness. But recent researches have shown that when things come in, they generally stay in the unconscious uh, um, networks of the brain. So they only become conscious when there are decision making that are quite limited, no, so yes or no, so one or two decisions. But most of the time when there are many possibilities, so the more complex decision making, for example, choosing your vocation, doing getting uh, a loved one, all of these things that are very complicated, they stay in the unconscious. So a small part only of the consciousness, a small part only becomes conscious. So consciousness does not seem to be, as we used to think, the overall property wherein we can move, no? So it turns out that most of this will be unconscious unless we come up with very strict things. Now, we are driven by positive and negative stimulus. So we avoid pain, we avoid damage, but we pursue things that can improve our well-being. No, now there is some laterality in the brain. The right, being the creative, would be more associated with uh, avoiding pain. This has been shown by neuroscience studies. And then those that are for pursuing would be more on the left. Now, the avoidance of pain is immediate, but the drive towards pleasure is more building up, and this contributes later on you to the happiness that is eudaimonia, the balance. So probably when we were young, when we were born, we already have a set of neural uh, information that has been put there for millions of years through evolution, but we develop our sense of what should be and what makes us happy. And therefore, where we came from would be the basis. And I could understand, therefore, that it cannot be a one for all. No? I am in a generation where I grew up totally with Tagalog. No, we speak Tagalog, we taught in Tagalog, and then when I entered the school, we were forced to speak in English. So probably the conceptual things in science and other disciplines I learned in Tagalog, but in English. But the deeper ones are really in Tagalog. But of course, younger generations, they talk in English, and then we also have to consider the other different language areas in the Philippines. So when I studied in Australia, um, I had 1 year in Australia. The first time that I heard somebody talk in Tagalog, it was such a pleasure. It was so relaxing. No? And then when I went home, uh, going back to the Philippines, I had a stopover in Singapore. I already became relaxed because it was a little similar already to the Asian culture and then to the Philippines. So I think based on the things that were said, one, we cannot really be very Tagalog centric. No? It's good that Tagalog has become quite universal in the Philippines because now we share a common experience. But where we grew up, where we started, where we were uh, nurtured by our mother, our parents, that is where we really built our culture. And that is embedded in the development of the brain. No? And we always look forward to that. We make connections to that whenever we look for what is a positive influence. So I think that will really be very important in terms of thinking, uh, considering the specific background of each individual. So it cannot be a one for all, no? But of course, we also have to consider the changing dynamics. Now there are a lot of influences from English, and therefore that can be accommodated. But in terms of the positive and the negative influences that I showed, we really make reference to what we have embedded and the way from everything that started with our birth to uh, the younger years of developing. So I think that is the basis of how we can have a more fulfilled sense of happiness, if that makes sense.
Thank you very much po,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Dasid. Dr. Cabral Lim, did you want to add to that?
Actually, I think one of the reasons we wanted to hold the summit is really we wanted really to discuss if we can agree or disagree to on common things, no? Because I have always been also wondered about what is the concept of Filipino well-being, and I do understand how complex it is, no? And considering how the Philippines is so varied in terms of culture, the differences in terms of the environment and all that. But the reason we also asked Bole to talk about indigenization is perhaps we can come with a basic framework that we can agree on, because we will need some parameters to measure at some point in time if there's going to be improvement, meaning something like how do we measure something that we have not we have no common agreement. But I think that will probably involve I don't know, a task force or a group really to address this, so we can whether we agree or agree to disagree. For example, like if we're imposing this mental health program, the government will have programs, then there will have to be scorecards on how we measure. So do we measure it by asking our people gaano kaginhawa ngayon, kagaya noon? And then of course, I do understand that the domains varies and they will change. Now, depending on of course, inherently, even though we say in the old days, we used to say inherently the genetics we cannot change, but we all know that there's a lot of neuroplasticity in the brain, which we did not know several decades ago. So it means even though you say you're born with the genetics, the environment, and then the social milieu will affect it. And I'm very happy now that we as the I am a clinical person, no? Dr. Dasig is a physiologist, and Bolet is a psychologist. Ninia is a social scientist. I am actually very happy that we're starting to talk now, no? And in fact, I do understand there's a lot of questions from the chat box, but please understand that this is just the beginning of attempt to putting everybody together, because we don't even know where everyone is. We don't even know where the expertise is. And of course, we want inclusiveness. This is just one Filipino, but we understand how immense and complex it is. But I think from the support that we get from the people participating in the summit, I think if we work together, we can do a lot of things. Meaning, if I liken it to building a house, it's probably better to start constructing rather than renovating something that is broken. So please bear with us. No, but I think considering, for example, like Dr. Beth De Castro was talking about resilience. You said you teach psychology of language. What is the closest now that we can translate resilience in Filipino? Or are we going towards that? For example, pag sinabi nating may ginhawa, and then the opposite is, how do we say na ano yung Filipinos are always being quoted abroad as resilient. But in our own language, how do we define what is resilience?
May I add one more?
Go ahead,
So
Dr. Dasig.
the framework I showed is a general biological framework. It was not directly to culture, but I wanted to make it as a framework for further research. We can be related to culture. As you can see, on the negative, on the stress side, we have a lot of things that we have. No, we have poverty. We have a lot of limitations with our resources, which can really be a stress. But we can see on the positive side that the Philippine culture offers a lot. No, our sense of community support and family support is one of the best, probably unsurpassed. And that can explain, for example, why a person can still remain resilient even when they go abroad. So we can frame many of these in terms of understanding what we are culturally. And I was offering that schema as a framework. Thank you.
Thank you po, Doc. Uh, Doc Mitch, meron pa ba tayong oras? Kung
Pwede pa, oo.
Pwede
But
pa.
might Ma'am Beth want to give a quick reply? And then we'll go to
Sige
the
po,
next question. Thank you, Daves.
Ma'am,
Ma'am,
Beth,
nakamute.
recording
Teka,
ko po.
teka.
Thank you,
Ayan.
Mitch.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Divine. Maraming salamat. I really appreciate the point of multiculturalism because I think there is a real sort of richness in understanding diversity and what happens in terms of language in relation to that, in terms of languages. When I was preparing the paper on resilience, I really tried very, very hard, which is the first base or the first step in trying to find out what is the loose translation of resilience in our culture. And I agree with Dr. Dasig that this is always used. Resilience is always used as an excuse, kaya naiinis na yung iba. Kasi sinasabi nila, instead of the government making efforts to address poverty, to address COVID, and to address the other, sabihin nila, okay na yan kasi resilient naman ang mga Pilipino. So it's being used now as a negative trait, in fact, rather than something that we have to sort of contend with in a positive way. So I wouldn't say, so in an effort to find a translation, which is not the way to go, I see, no? Some people would say malasakit, compassion. And some people would say coping, no? O in Tagalog, recovery. O pag ano, no? Pag-angkop sa kagipitan. In one of my thesis, ang translate ko sa coping is pag-angkop sa kagipitan at ligalig. In other words, there is not one single word. There is a phrase or there is a concept that we have to understand. So yung po importante sa kultura. Nung nagbigay po si Dr. Bolet ng mga iba-ibang konteksto ng kultura sa iba-ibang kultura, sa iba-ibang idea ng ginhawa, nangyayari na rin po yan sa psikolohiyang Pilipino. Meron na po tayo ngayong mga pag-aaral tungkol sa mga indigenous communities ng Mindanao at sa iba pang mga komunidad sa Agta at sa iba pa. Ano pong masasabi natin? Kaya po ako nag-focus sa pagkataong Pilipino kasi maganda yung contribution ni Dr. Karangdang doon sa kanyang being and becoming. Kasi sa kanya yung konteksto niya, sinabi niya yung being as differentiated from becoming. Importante po yun sa pagiging. So ano ibig sabihin ng konteksto? Alamin natin kung ano yung may tanong din dito on character and personality. So importante po anong kontekstong ginagalawan kapag ang isang tao ay resilient. Kasi po, ang resilience ay hindi isang trait o isang characteristic. Ito po ay isang proseso ng paglangoy o pagdaloy mula sa labas, which is an outsider point of view, patungo sa loob. So yung konsepto ng inner strength, no? Again, this is an attempt to translate, no? Pero yung pong inner strength or inner will or inner self ay importante pong malaman dahil ang pinanggagalingan po ng resilience ay ang panloob o yung ating kalooban. So ang hahanapin po natin ay ano ang nasa ating kalooban. Pero anong relational aspect niyan? Kasi okay lang from within, from within, from within. Pero hindi naman po nararapat yon kung meron tayong mga programa sapagkat yung sharing po, napakalaki ng spiritual element, no? Mind, body, and spirit. Ang pinag-aaralan lang po natin ngayon ay mind and body. Hindi po tayo nag-uusap ano yung dimensions ng consciousness at ng spiritual dimensions na nabanggit na po ni Dr. Bolet. So yun po, ibig sabihin po, sa pag-aaral natin at paghanap natin ng ano ang Pilipinong konteksto, hindi ko po sinasabi sa inyong Tagalog na konteksto kasi mahaba na po ang debate kung ating wika ay wikang Tagalog o wikang Pilipino. So ang wika po natin at ang local language natin, pag tinanong, what is your national language? Pilipino po yan, hindi po yan Tagalog. Marami na pong debate tungkol dyan. Ano yung Pilipino? Yan po ang pinag-uusapan natin ngayon. Yung embodiment ng kulturang Pilipino na tumatago sa ating the fiber of our being. At yan po ay nasa inner elements ng ating kalooban.
Thank you po, Doc Beth. At naka-raise po ata ang hand ni Dr. Lazo. So may we call on Dr. Lazo kung meron po siyang question or comment.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to make a rejoinder. Yung question na, sorry hindi ko ma-open ng video ko, no? Yung question na dapat ba may isa lang tayong framework. One, I think it was already mentioned, there's so much diversity in language and culture within the country. And therefore, it may not be the right time to push for that. But I would like to say that katulad nung nabanggit ni Beth, may mga pag-aaral na sa Mindanao. I hope meron din sa Visayas. Sana yon, from the standpoint of research, I think it is important for us to pull together these bits of knowledge, no? And so that we can tell ourselves as a community of professionals in mental health that this is what we know and that this is what we do not know. Right now, ang alam natin, yung nalalaman natin from the Tagalog point of view. Pilipino ang i-argue ni iba, but the main point I want to make is that I think we have to, our level of knowledge is incomplete, but there are researches and studies already, and Psikolohiyang Pilipino can give us some. And it's good to pull that together and sift, ano ba ang knowledge, what knowledge do we really have for now in Mindanao or Visayas, in the different cultures, and then let's compare that, okay, and see if we can weld them together into one common framework. So I'd say, I would not say no, but I think we need to put together first those information. Number two, I think that we mounted this series because it was in the spirit of encouraging research in mental health. And it is nice to know that there is this exploration of the concepts on mental health, well-being, and for us again to put them together because parang we think we know, but we don't really know. When you mention, for example, Dr. Dasig, poverty affects us, affects mental health. There are a lot of studies here, there, and everywhere with different degrees of rigor, but to be able to make the attribution, poverty is causing mental health, if you follow the doctrines of psychological research, we're still not there, no? And this is why we are mounting this study on social determinants of mental health, mainly as a review of literature for now. Because we want, as I said, we want to know what knowledge we have, no? And by the way, I'm mentioning that because if some of you have any studies related to that, we would like to request if you could share it with us through the DOH or through the emails. We can give that. We can give you the email. But I think then the other thing is, I said incomplete knowledge. The reason we are now into this discussion is because there are developments in the neurosciences, in positive psychology, in technology that will enable us to gain access to certain knowledge that we have to bring to bear in our understanding of mental health and mental well-being. So gusto ko lang sabihin, ang daming areas for research, kailangan pa nating mag-aral. Let me stop there so that there's more space for the others, okay?
Okay, thank you po. Thank you. Speaking of aral, just noting meron po uling mga ilang pragmatic or practical na tanong. So noting lang na merong isang nagtanong kung meron daw po bang pa-training or seminar sa qualitative analysis. So yung pong ginagawa namin ni Doc Mitch na pag-cluster ng mga comments ninyo, tawag po dyan thematic analysis. Meron na po kayo libreng
Example.
Example. So, noting lang po siguro nga yung halaga ng training kung gusto nating mas magkaroon ng pananaliksik on well-being. Yung isa pa po, inote ko lang na merong mga nagpapaalam tungkol sa paggamit or pag-cite, for example, nung kay Dr. Bautista na iskala ng ginhawa. Okay lang ba yun, Doc Bo, na i-email na lang nila ikaw? Or unmute, Doc. Unmute ka po.
With regards to the skala ng ginhawa, this is still in the process of development. So we'll get you updated and send you updates on the development of the scale. But bringing out the scale right now may not be appropriate yet in terms of developing the scale, but we'll update you. There were also questions about where we can find the book on resilience that we have authored. That was printed by Save the Children. I think it's UK. Okay, and it was published in 2001. There were 2 volumes. One is the scientific report itself. The other one is more popular. But I think we have sent out all the books already.
Example po si
Those are examples.
Dr.
That's an
De
example
Castro.
of the technical report in printed form. You may find them in libraries such as the UP Diliman main library, also at UP Seeds library, and at not UP, the Beth, we still have copies.
PSTCRRC?
PSTCRRC
or CIDS.
SIDS, CIDS.
Oo.
So you have to go to those libraries to get to read. I don't know if they have been fully placed in the internet, kung na-upload na sila.
Email us. We have some extra copies, but you might have to pick it up or pay somebody to pick it. But we have a few extra copies. Okay.
Okay, thank you po. May time pa ba tayo?
Oh.
Kaya ba?
Yes po. Si Ma'am Presi Cuevas po was also raising her hand. Baka related din po sa discussion na ito.
Yes,
Ma'am Presi? Sorry po, nakamute. Ayan.
Yeah, magandang umaga sa ating lahat. Salamat, and just would like again to make mention that the reason why we're staging this series of webinars through the PCMH Technical Working Group on Research, or Technical Committee on Research, is really to find practical interventions that we can, and we would be able, to incorporate in the interventions that we are going to be making, or we are going to be incorporating in the implementation of the mental health law and expanding the mental health services that we have in this country. So importante po sa atin lahat ng mga pinag-uusapan po ninyo. And I think the more practical, not questions at the moment, I don't want answers actually, but the more practical probably considerations really is when, after all of the researches that we have, and I go with what Dr. Lasso is saying, maybe we can put all of these together, come out with some recommendations as to how we can really put this as part of our interventions. As of the moment, ang approach po natin in the implementation of the the law actually, and in providing the services that we need to have, biopsychosocial approaches, recovery ang approach dapat, human rights ang approach, at saka, we use the continuum na dapat asymptomatic pa lang yung population up to the level, to the time that they are now recovering. Ano bang mga interventions natin yan? And all of these na pinag-uusapan natin, and particularly yung very interested sa kay Dr. Nina na presentation earlier, I think doon siguro talaga siya papasok doon sa early part no ng continuum, yung so how can we translate that into real interventions? So what do we want to be able our population to be able to access to, what kind of interventions we are going to be pursuing, so on and so forth. But of course, those are things that kailangan pa natin talaga siguro himay-himayin after all these reports and researches that we are going to do. But yes, yun po yung pinaka-importante na rason bakit we're doing all of these things. And by the way, maganda-handa na po kayo ng mga topics ninyo for researches, because this will be something that we will push really for funding next year ahead, PCHRD and wherever we can get funding support for mental health researches. Kaya salamat, and we're looking forward to more interactions with our researchers all over the country. Thank you so much.
Thank you po, ma'am. Time check lang, Doc Mitch. Okay pa ba tayo?
Yeah, I think I have to ask the organizers if we're permitted to go slightly over time, or should we?
I think there's still the integration and
Yes.
conclusion that needs to be given.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have
yeah.
to end the Q&A here.
So we thank not only the panel members, but certainly our audience and participants for a very healthy, lively discussion. Maraming salamat po sa sharing of insights.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ong and Dr. Salvador, for helping us in the moderation of the Q&A. And also many thanks for those who raised their questions. We hope that we are able to answer all of their questions. For those who were not able to recognize your questions, we will take note of these and probably compile all of your queries. So before we proceed, we'd also like to inform everyone that the materials and presentations for this morning can be accessed through this link as flashed on the screen, and is also placed in the chat box. And for the post-evaluation, we would like to request everyone to answer through this link flashed on your screens and also in the chat box. Thank you. We will be giving you enough time to answer the evaluation.
Link can be reached out. Okay. It can be reached. Leng, balik mo ko na wala ako.
Sir Marlon, there are
Cannot open.
there are concerns on the link not being able to be accessed. Is there a way that we can fix it? Yes, po, we're taking note po of your queries or your concerns. Ayan po.
Doc Bolet. Doc Bolet. Hello, Doc Bolet.
Yes, Dr. Hines, it's your time.
Yeah. I think now we have to have first integration before we have the post-evaluation. Yeah.
Sige, ma'am.
Yeah,
We'll
please.
proceed with the synthesis of today's summit.
You're the first one.
Okay. So to give us a synthesis of today's summit and a closing message, let us welcome Dr. Adelaida Hines, the immediate past president of the Philippine Guidance and Counseling Association Incorporated and the co-chair of our webinar series 2. Dr. Hines, for your closing message.
Okay, so good noon to everyone. And initially, I want to congratulate our speakers. They have given their whole heart with a very comprehensive information, very educational, and indeed very encouraging, very motivating. And I do suppose that the end of this second webinar series, then we'll all be excited to start a research. So initially, Dr. Karandang started with the Mentimeter in order that should be able to contextualize what the topic is all about on well-being and being Filipino. And really, context matters. In the context of the individual Filipino, the family, the society, and the community as a whole, being Filipinos. So that's one. And we have taken the answer, mabuti, mabeauty, and all of these things. So very interesting answers, which is very much Filipino. That at times, even at the midst of adversity, we would have that the very Filipino to put something that is to make the load lighter. Yung mabeauty po. So, and all of these things. So, and we would notice that based on the dissertation of our speaker, Dr. Nina Karandang, she based it on her dissertation, and specifically, she made use of well-being to mean kagalingan. But of course, it has a lot of various meanings. Well-being, health, and happiness, being proficient in something, living in harmony, and a lot more. So in essence, we have to define well-being considering two perspectives, that is the biomedical and also the people's perspective, meaning that it should be socially constructed. Okay, so and there's this challenge posted to us that by being or by having this well-being in every Filipino, we have yet to live well and be well, and we have yet to feel well and to understand better what well-being or kagalingan would mean in our own Filipino context. Followed by this is the topic given by Dr. Elizabeth De Castro, specifically on cultural roots and well-being. So you would take note that Dr. De Castro focused on the concept of loob and the kapwa. So which is again very interesting. The terms in Filipino, loob and kapwa, are really striking. As in our example now. So utang na loob. So kagandahan loob, kabutihan loob, or walang utang na loob. So this would really capture what we feel and what we do. In as far as the concept of loob and the kapwa, which would mean shared identity. And this has been followed. Of course, there were a lot of models given by Dr. Castro, and she specifically singled out also, no, the study conducted by Bautista and all et al, no, specifically on resilience, and hence later on, Dr. Bollet has shared with us an instrument to measure well-being, and she or the team, no, together with Dr. Salvador, no, termed it as maginhawa, no. So later on, I'm going to continue with that, no. Then there was also the neuroscience of well-being and resilience by Dr. Darwin Dasig, wherein he focused on the biological considerations on the brain and the self, specifically on the genetics, stress, how it would affect the well-being of the Filipino. And of course, other considerations are into positive environment, say for example, having happiness, positive psychology, and also other considerations as the biological aspect and the neural circuitry cognition, and the emotional thing. He has shown a framework on how this stress would be affecting the brain and the well-being as brought about by the considerations that he has discussed early on. And then of course, the last one again has something to do with the indigenization and the measurement of well-being, as I've stated earlier by Dr. Bollet and her counterpart, Dr. Salvador. Indeed, this tool to measure well-being is very much welcoming because this is now it is now one aspect of the mental health law wherein we should know our state of well-being, or we should know our state of kagalingan or state of yung pagiging maginhawa, in order that would be able to give the appropriate interventions to the Filipino people in all settings, be it in the school, the workplace, or in the community settings. So, of course, he gave Dr. Bautista, and Dr. Salvador gave all the processes in how they are going to measure well-being, considering some constructs such as yung magaan, masigla, what other concepts, so which are very much Filipino, sigla, gana, gaan, and ligaya. So these are the subscale. Now, if we are going to go back to the question and answer that was raised early on, one concern has something to do with the language. And it was stated that language matters, because language is the mirror, as given by Dr. Castro early on, that language is a mirror of culture. So therefore, and we do believe in our experiences, and observe, in what we experience, that if we are going to speak in the Filipino language, in terms of our thoughts, in terms of our feelings, it would really capture what we want to say. So yung kagaanan ng loob, yung bigat ng loob, and all of these things. So also, if we are going to put an equivalence of resilience in the Filipino language is another thing. And I think this is one challenge that as of the moment, probably we have yet to do a lot of research on resilience, so that in the length of time, we would be able to come up with a framework, in all of these constructs, or concepts such as well-being, resilience, or mental health per se. But in coming up with a basic framework, Dr. Lasso, no, and I do agree that it's something good for us to come up with a framework later on. But for now, it would be better if we are going to put all these studies being conducted in all regions of the Philippines, Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, no? Specifically in the context of, no, in the construct of well-being, mental health, or resistance, or any matter for that matter, no, related to mental health. Okay, and by putting all these researches together, no, because one thing is sure that we have all started this already, even before the approval of this Mental Health Act of 2018. No, we have started doing, no, some constructs even during the time of Dr. Enriquez, no, in his Filipino psychology. No? So then it is being, no, suggested that we are going to put all these researches, this construct that we have started it, and we try to explore some more, no, on these studies, and and later on, probably, then we would be able to come up with a common framework, no? Wherein Frances, no, mentioned early on also that this is the very essence of this series of webinars, which we started in July and to end, no, sometime in October, for us to be able to titillate probably, no, the minds of our scientists, you be a psychologist, social scientist, guidance counselor, or any, no, or any profession, no, or any mental health professional, that we should be complementing each other in terms of arriving at a multi and interdisciplinary approach, no, to this common constructs such as well-being, resilience, and mental health in its totality. So that at the end of the day, then we'd be able to make all of these things as a basis for an intervention, no? And that was the essence of what, no, Ma'am Frances has stated early on, no, that by the result of all of these researches, no, by the result of these common practices and ideas, then we'll be able to incorporate this in the intervention, specifically for the implementation, no, of the Mental Health Act of 2018. So at this point, let us take this as a challenge, no, to pursue, no, any research, no matter how small, and give a contribution in this body of existing knowledge, no? So that we, in the profession, would be able to share, no, a responsibility. Because after all, as helping professionals, mental health for everyone is the responsibility of everyone. So on this note again, congratulations to the organizers of this, starting off from the Department of Health, from the Philippine Council for Mental Health, specifically on the Technical Committee of Health, chaired by Dr. Leonor Cabral Lim, and then this specific webinar on culture, well-being, and resilience, chaired by Dr. Bolet Bautista. Again, no, our warm congratulations and profound gratitude to our speakers, specifically to Dr. Ninya Karandang, Dr. Castro rather, I'm sorry, Dr. Dasig, who else? Dr. Of course, our chair, Dr. Violet Bautista, our chair for this second webinar. And also, to our moderators, Dr. Divina Salvador, Dr. Michelle Ong, and of course, Marlon Alcantara, and other technicians who are behind this webinar series 2. At this point, I'd want to make an announcement that our webinar series 3 on governance and leadership would take place on August 16. Again, if we have more than 400 participants today, I suppose that this would be doubled or tripled, come webinar series 3 on August 16. So at this point, congratulations to all. And I do suppose that we'll be able to attain the very rational and the objective of this series of webinars. Okay, that would be able to give our contribution in implementing successfully the Mental Health Act of 2018. So at this point, I now turn over this to Marlon Alcantara for us to work on the post-evaluation. No? Marlon, so at this point, thank you. And again, congratulations and good day to everyone.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hines. I also would like to remind everyone to please accomplish the evaluation. As of now, we only have like 200 plus participants who completed the evaluation. So we'd like each our participants to complete the evaluation, as this will be the basis for the issuance of the certificates. And we also would like to thank everyone for being with us till the end of the summit, for joining us for the series 2 of our summit. Flashed on their screens are the schedule for the upcoming series. To our speakers and panelists, our gratitude goes out to you for sharing your time and expertise with us. To all of the participants in our meeting, and also in and all of our viewers from the live streaming, thank you very much for your participation. So that's about it for the series 2 of our summit. We hope that it has been a productive knowledge sharing for everyone. On behalf of the entire team behind the summit, again, we thank everyone for joining us this morning. Please, we'd like to remind everyone before leaving the room to comply with the post-evaluation link. Is posted in the chat box. Thank you. To our remaining attendees, please comply with the evaluation form. We still have like 290 participants who completed the evaluation. We would hope that you'd be able to complete the evaluation, as this will be the basis for the issuance of the certificates. Thank you.
Actively and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. Ang mental health ay mahalaga sa ating pangkabuuan at individual na abilidad magtrabaho, mag-isip, makaramdam at mabuhay. Kaya naman ngayong panahon ng pandemya, huwag kalimutang pangalagaan ang ating mental health tulad ng pag-aalaga natin sa ating physical health. Ang self-care ay isa sa pinakamabisang paraan upang pangalagaan ang ating mental health. Ang simpleng pag-exercise o pagtutok sa ating mga hobbies ay isang paraan ng self-care. Care for yourself. Bigyang oras ang sarili at mga bagay na nagbibigay sa'yo ng saya. Nagkakaroon ka na rin ba ng Zoom fatigue dahil sa meetings o di kaya ay sa online class? Huwag kalimutang magpahinga. Importanteng maglaan ng break at ipahinga ang utak. Maglaro muna ng paboritong games. Malaking tulong ang breathing exercises sa pagpapakalma at para maibsan ang ating pakiramdam. Matuto ring mag-set ng boundaries para sa iyong work-life balance. Matutong irespeto ang work boundaries ng iyong mga katrabaho. Dahil sa pandemya ang ating kinakaharap, hindi mapigilan na tayo ay mapalayo sa ating mga mahal sa buhay. Ngunit hindi dapat maging hadlang ang distansya upang tayo ay mag-hashtag care for others. Nakumusta mo na ba sina lolo at lola this week? How about sina mama at papa? Mga kapatid, kaklase. Kung hindi pa, ang isang simpleng kumusta sa pamamagitan ng video or voice calls o text messages ay tiyak na makatutulong sa kanilang mental well-being. Care for others, ang isang malakas na support system ay nakakatulong rin sa pagpapabuti ng ating mental health. Kung ikaw o sino man sa iyong kakilala ang nangangailangan na makipag-usap sa isang mental health professional, tumawag lamang sa mga numerong ito mula sa National Center for Mental Health. Ito ay libre lamang at kahit sino ay pwedeng tumawag. Ngayong panahon ng pandemya, hindi biro ang pinagdadaanan mo, kaya naman make sure to care for yourself and care for others para sa isang healthy Pilipinas.
can I sit with you? My name is Daisy. Ano nga ulit pangalan mo? Parati kang mag-isa. Tapos, minsan nakikita ka nakatitig ka lang sa kawalan. Siguro you're finding it weird that I'm trying so hard to be friends with you.
Bakit ka ba kasi nandito?
Kailangan ko ng tulong mo.
Daisy!
Hi, can I sit with you? My name is Daisy. Ano nga ulit pangalan mo? Parati kang mag-isa. Tapos, minsan nakikita ka nakatitig ka lang sa kawalan. Siguro you're finding it weird that I'm trying so hard to be friends with you.
Bakit ka ba kasi nandito?
Kailangan ko ng tulong mo.